Chapter 131. A ray of light flashed by, and Yu Qianshou returned to the courtyard that he hadn't seen for many days. In fact, this round trip to the Demon Ghost region didn't take more than 10 days. He released his divine sense to check, but Ling Feng and the others weren't there. They probably went to work. He returned to his room, closed the door, and disappeared. When Guan Yu and Chun Feng saw Yu Qianshou, they both called out with a sad expression, "Boss, something was wrong?" Yu Qianshou nodded with a smile and walked to their side. He saw nearly 400 people gathered in a depression in front of him. They were the disciples from the various sects that he had brought from the Demon Ghost region. All the men and women were sitting on the ground with dispirited spirits. Their natal primordial spirits had been stripped away by Sujin, so their spirits weren't much better. These two fellows probably thought of him when they saw them, and it felt like they were in the same boat. Yu Qianshou frowned, turned his head, and shouted, "Don't think too much. Don't you know what kind of person Sister Bai is? By the way, Chun Feng, have you planted the spirit herbs I asked you to?" "Yes," Chun Feng replied. "I want to refine a cauldron of pills. Help me get 3 portions." Yu Qianshou nodded. After Chun Feng left with the order, he looked at the disciples in front of him, pinched his chin, and began to ponder. Not long after, Chun Feng brought him the spirit herbs. Yu Qianshou's eyes swept over the two of them. He was silent for a long time, making the two of them a little uneasy. Then he said with a very serious expression, "There are some important things for you to do. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've been very worried." "What are you worried about?" "I'm worried about whether you two can do it." "Why worry?" "Because you two are worthy of my trust." After saying this, the 3 of them fell silent. After a while, Guan Yu and Chun Feng exchanged glances, and Chun Feng said excitedly, "Boss, if you have anything to say, we'll do our best." Yu Qianshou patted him on the shoulder and said, "This matter is of great importance, and it is indeed related to our future. Forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. I'll try a batch of pills first, then I'll come back and have a good talk with you too." Only the 2 of them were left with strange feelings. Yu Qianshou teleported directly into the omphalos. The misty array immediately made way for him when he arrived. After he entered, the array closed up again. It was Sujin who was controlling it from inside. Ever since she had obtained a pile of these things, Sujin had not gone out at all. She had been guarding the Adumbra flower all this time, afraid that it would be stolen. Yu Qianshou could not help but feel excited as he looked at the huge pile of top-grade spirit stones sparkling with purple light. This was his fortune. He grabbed a handful and scattered them. This was money. "Sis, let's begin," Yu Qianshou said to Sujin after enjoying himself to his heart's content. The latter nodded. Her usually gentle and quiet face was flushed with excitement. For a woman, youth was not always an irresistible temptation. Yu Qianshou climbed onto the black lump and stared at the Adumbra flower carefully. He had not looked at it carefully ever since he found it. Legend had it that it took 1,000 years to grow a single strand, but there were actually close to 200 strands. Didn't that mean that this Adumbra flower had grown for close to 200,000 years? It was a bit difficult to make a move. Close to 200,000 years. What kind of concept was that? It was a sin. Yu Qianshou silently muttered sin as he stretched out his fingers and gently plucked out 3 strands. After jumping down, he waved the white velvet strands in front of Sujin and said with a bitter smile, 3,000 years for such a small thing. Sujin nodded and suddenly asked doubtfully, "Is 3 enough? Should I pluck some more?" "It's enough, it's enough." Yu Qianshou hurriedly waved his hand and said, 1 strand for each set of spiritual herbs is enough. Sis, don't look down on this little thing. This is a heavenly treasure that only grows a single strand every 1,000 years. It's not good to use too many of these pills. 1 strand is just right. The 2 of them exited the formation and entered a small cave. Deep underground, the temperature gradually rose, and they could vaguely see the red, rolling lava in front of them. The 2 of them turned into a newly excavated stone room. Flames were raging inside, and a hole in the center of the room was spewing out raging flames. Bai Sujin waved her large sleeves, and a pill furnace beside her flew up, just in time to suppress the fire. The stone room immediately darkened. Yu Qianshou took out the pill recipe Jade archive and found the Rui pill among the top-grade pills. He repeated the pill recipe that he had already memorized and compared it in his mind. Then, he practiced it a few times in his mind. After making sure that there were no mistakes, the pill furnace was almost ready to heat up. The lid of the furnace opened, and a strand of adumbra flower was thrown into the furnace along with several spiritual herbs. Yu Qianshou immediately sealed the top of the furnace and concentrated on refining. Suddenly, he noticed a strand of divine scents attached to the walls of the furnace. Needless to say, it was definitely Bai Sujin's. There was no one else here either. Not long after, the various spiritual herbs were refined into sparkling liquids of various colors. When that strand of adumbra flower was refined, it immediately turned into a tiny drop of spiritual liquid that shone brightly. A heavenly treasure was indeed a heavenly treasure. Ordinary spiritual herbs couldn't compare to it. Yu Qianshou steadied his mind and immediately became as calm as still water. He used his divine sense to control the airflow and the various spiritual liquids, starting a magnificent performance. Light and shadow crisscrossed and intersected like a dream. Bai Sujin was mesmerized as she watched. Although she wasn't proficient in alchemy, she had traveled the cultivation world for many years and more or less knew a little about alchemy. She had never seen such a bold and unconstrained refining method. It was simply inconceivable. It wasn't until the performance in the furnace was over and the pills were formed and being roasted that Bai Sujin leisurely retracted that strand of divine sense. Her bright eyes looked towards Yu Qianshou, who had his eyes closed and was meditating. A trace of infatuation flashed in her eyes. "Big sister, catch the pills." Yu Qianshou slammed his palm into the furnace lid, and in an instant, 10 balls of light rushed out of the furnace. Bai Sujin, who had regained her senses, opened her slender palm, and the 10 balls of light drew a beautiful arc in the air before gathering in her palm. Yu Qianshou immediately ran over with a smile on his face. When he suddenly saw the dazzling balls of light in Bai Sujin's palm, he was immediately stunned. He took one of the pills from her hand. Even he himself was taken aback. The Rui pill between his fingers was so blurry that it was almost impossible to see what it looked like inside. It was shrouded in a layer of pill halo. The pill halo was completely different from the pill halo he had seen before. It was actually a dazzling rainbow glow. It could probably be used as a light source in a dark place. Bai Sujin covered her mouth in shock. Yu Qianshou smiled foolishly and said, "Big sister, it should be a success?" The former nodded vigorously. If this wasn't a success, then what was? Although the pill recipe Jade archive didn't record this phenomenon after the pills were formed, anyone could tell that this furnace of pills was quite successful. Yu Qianshou didn't have much experience with this kind of situation. He attributed it to the miraculous effects of the adumbra flower. However, he didn't know that the pill refining method he had unintentionally invented was already qualified to establish his own sect. He had to admit that it was a stroke of good fortune. However, a certain someone was completely unaware of it. He continued to work hard and produced another 2 batches of pills that were 100% successful. From Yu Qianshou's point of view, this wasn't strange at all. He had never refined a failed pill before. If the seniors of the pill sect from thousands of years ago were to find out about this, they would probably be so ashamed that they wouldn't be able to show their faces. Chapter 132. He placed the 2 batches of completed pills into his storage pouch. Bai Sujin held the 10 rainbow glow pills in her palms and handed them over. Yu Qianshou was taken aback and gently blocked them with his hand. Then, he looked at her and shook his head lovingly. He said softly, "This pill is called the Rui pill. It's one of the best quality pills in the elixir recipe Jade archive. Its effects are extraordinary. It has the miraculous effect of detoxifying and maintaining youthfulness. It's the best pill for women to maintain their skin. Sister, it's just right for you to keep." Besides, the first batch of pills was originally meant for you. Bai Sujin's eyes were filled with tenderness. She didn't say anything and simply nodded her head. Then, she put the pills in her waist pouch. With a wave of her sleeve, the pill furnace flew up and landed in a corner of the stone room. In an instant, the room was filled with a fiery red color. The two of them tacitly walked out. Yu Qianqiu stood at the peak of the mountain and watched as Bai Sujin fluttered on the cliff wall of the deep valley. With a wave of her hand, she wrote the words "Forbidden Area" with an imposing aura. Her graceful figure once again twisted in the air and gently landed beside him. A cool breeze blew, and her beautiful hair fluttered. The two of them stood there silently, quietly looking in the direction of the bamboo house. "Sister, I like the feeling of standing on high place." Sister, shall we build a house on this mountain?" Yu Qianqiu turned his head and stared at the peerless beauty beside him for a while. His heart was at peace. Not long after, Guan Yu and Chun Feng, who were summoned by his divine sense, arrived on their swords. The two of them landed and called out in unison, "Boss." Yu Qianqiu smiled and took out 2 purple crystals, handing them to the two of them. He said, "These are very precious. I almost lost my life in the demon domain to get them. It's not much. Each of you could take 10. Bai Sujin's eyes were still calm. Chun Feng looked at the purple crystals in his hand and scratched his head. "Boss, what is this?" Guan Yu seemed to be in disbelief. He looked at the purple crystal in his hand and touched it. After a long time, he cried out involuntarily, "Is this a top-grade spirit stone?" Chun Feng hurriedly held it in front of his eyes and said with widened eyes, "Could it be a top-grade spirit stone that can be exchanged for 10,000 top-grade spirit stones?" "Not bad." Yu Qianqiu laughed and scolded. "Two useless things. Aren't they just a few stones? Quickly put them away. I still have something to tell you, too." The two of them carefully put them away in their storage pouches. Chun Feng's eyes were slightly red as he muttered, "Earlier, you said that you nearly lost your life to get this. Now you say it's just a few stones. Brat, you learned to talk back to me." Yu Qianqiu jokingly scolded. As he spoke, a rainbow-colored light flashed in his hand, and he handed one to each of them, saying, "This is the good stuff. I just refined it." The two of them held the rainbow-colored light in their hands and looked at each other. Guan Yu said blankly, "Boss, what is this?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "Rui pill, a pill that can make you look young. Any scars on your body, as long as you take it, I guarantee that they will immediately disappear and you will be as good as new. It can also give you a physique that is immune to all poisons. It is also refined from the treasures I obtained from the demon domain this time. Look young? A physique that is immune to poisons? That is really a treasure." The two of them were pleasantly surprised and seemed to be considering whether they should take it now. "All right, put away the treasures first. The two of you have taken your things. It is time to be obedient and work." Yu Qianqiu pretended to be unhappy. He said it so directly, but the two of them did not mind. They smiled and put away the treasures, then bowed and waited for orders. Yu Qianqiu suddenly waved his hand and pointed, "I want to build a palace on top of this mountain. Now, I want to ask the two of you, do you have the confidence to build it for me?" The two of them were shocked and looked around. To build a palace on top of a mountain, how big of a project would that be? Though their abilities were thousands of times stronger than mortals, with their abilities alone, they really did not know how long it would take to build it. The two of them looked at each other. This treasure was really hard to obtain. Guan Yu bitterly smiled. "Boss, it's not that. It's just that our abilities are limited." Chun Feng also nodded. "You two idiots." Yu Qianqiu pointed down the mountain and said, "I brought so many people here for you to use. What are you afraid of?" The two of them were shocked. Guan Yu bitterly smiled again. "Boss, you know that the weakest of those people are at the completion level. How can we command them?" Bai Sujin slowly turned her head and stared at the two of them. She calmly said, "With me here, just order them around. If they don't listen, just kill them." Her tone was very calm, but the coldness in her words was very easy to sense. The three men were all stunned. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled. "You two just do as I say. If they don't listen, I'll deal with them. What ha? But you have to know your limits. If they can repent, you have to give them a chance. You can't kill them all. These people are still useful to me. Guan Yu and Shen Feng looked at each other and solemnly said, Sister Bai, we understand. They directly ignored Yu Qianzhou's words, causing the latter to keep signaling them with his eyes. It couldn't be helped. To Yu Qianzhou, Bai Suzhen's prestige in Utopia was very important. When he wasn't around, he needed someone he could trust to take care of everything. He could only purse his lips and say, as long as the two of you know what to do. As for the blueprints and materials needed to build the palace, I'll think of a way to get them as soon as possible. You don't have to worry about that. There's another important matter. You two have to be mentally prepared. Seeing that he was talking about serious matters, the two of them stopped laughing and looked at him seriously. Yu Qianzhou solemnly said, Yin Chang, get rid of all the women among the 400 people. There are many people in Utopia, and things are complicated. It won't do if you don't have some people under you. Those women will listen to you. As for the others, I'll leave them to you. At this point, he paused and stared at Guan Yu with sparkling eyes. He shouted, Yin Chang, haven't you always wanted to lead an army to the battlefield like Guan Yu? All right, I'll give you my full support and give you this opportunity. I want to build an army of the cultivation world, an invincible army of the cultivation world. These hundreds of people will be your touchstone. Do you have the guts to take on this responsibility? If you can't, say it as soon as possible so that I can find someone else. The moment he said that, Guan Yu and Shen Feng were shocked. Oh my God, what was he trying to do? Why did he want to build an army of the cultivation world? On the other hand, Bai Suzhen stood there calmly. Yu Qianzhou continued to stare at Guan Yu with a burning gaze. To him, the existence of an army required a strong financial power. Now that the conditions were ripe, a large number of supreme-grade spirit stones would suffice. Even if it was not enough, as long as the army was built, there would naturally be a way to make money. Wasn't there a saying like robbing the rich to give to the poor? At first, Guan Yu's blood was boiling, but he did not immediately agree. After calming down a bit, he slowly said, Boss, I have the guts and I really want to take on this responsibility. However, I've never done such a thing before. I'm afraid I'll ruin Boss's big plan. It's good that you know how to think carefully. I was really afraid that you would agree without thinking. If that happened, I really wouldn't dare to let you do this. Now it seems that I didn't misjudge you. Yu Qianzhou smiled and patted his shoulder. Yin Chang, there's a first time for everything. As long as you do it diligently, there's nothing you can't do. Perhaps you'll have to take more detours, but it doesn't matter. I believe that you can do it well. Don't worry. I know a little about leading troops. When the time comes, I can give you some ideas. That's settled. From today onwards, those few hundred people will be your subordinates. Don't care if they're core formation or original infant. You only need to know one thing. They're all your soldiers. With Yu Qianzhou's words as a foundation, Guan Yu immediately nodded his head with great confidence. At the side, Chun Feng's face was full of envy. Which man didn't have the dream of galloping on the battlefield? Yu Qianzhou fiercely stared at him and shouted, What are you looking at? You also have something to do. Tell me first if you have the confidence to do it. If you don't, I won't bother to talk to you. There are many people out there. Yes. Chun Feng patted his chest and said passionately, Boss, if you have something to say, I'll definitely do it well. In his opinion, since Yu Qianzhou dared to do something as crazy as building an army in the cultivation world, the mission he gave him must be extraordinary. If he didn't participate, he would be letting himself down. Chapter 133. That's good. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, Chen Feng, I'm sure you don't want your family's talisman crafting skills to be lost, right? Chen Feng nodded and said, Of course. Good. Yu Qianzhou stared at him with a powerful gaze and said, Then I'll let you become a master of talisman crafting, alchemy, and blacksmithing in one. Chen Feng scratched his head and said in surprise, Boss, what do you mean? Yu Qianzhou looked at the place where the various sects' disciples gathered and said leisurely, A strong army must have a strong logistic support. Without logistic support, it's bullshit to build an army. In the cultivation world, alchemy and magic tools are indispensable. I'll find some subordinates for you. Your task is to ensure the necessities of Yun Chang's army. As for alchemy and blacksmithing, I'll prepare them for you. Don't worry." After hearing that, Guan Yu nodded in agreement and looked at Chen Feng with hope. But the latter had a troubled expression. "That's what I'm doing." "Then wouldn't I be doing odd jobs for Guan Yu?" "Boss, I also want to lead an army. You should leave the logistics to someone else." Yu Qianqiu glared and shouted angrily. "Then why did you agree so readily just now? Are you making fun of me?" No. Chen Feng quickly waved his hand and explained, "I didn't know that boss was talking about this, so what?" Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and interrupted him in a deep voice. "I'll give you 2 choices. 1. A man should do what he promised. 2. Pack up your things and go back to your 100 Flowers Valley to sell talismans. I can't tolerate a great bargaining god like you here." They had known each other for a long time. Every time Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and spoke, it meant that he was really angry. Guan Yu looked at Chen Feng worriedly. After a long time, they had developed feelings for each other, and they were also familiar with each other. The two of them had a tacit understanding when they worked together. From a selfish point of view, he still hoped that Chen Feng would be the one to work with him. Of course, he had also placed himself in the main position, while Chen Feng was only a supporting character. I. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was really angry, Chen Feng hurriedly said, "I" a few times. Finally, he stomped his feet and said, "Boss, don't be angry. I'll listen to you." "I wouldn't dare." Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at him and said, "I, Yu Qianqiu, want brothers who help me sincerely. Don't force yourself to help my brother just to give me face." "I won't force you. Just go and do what you need to do." "I, Yu Qianqiu, have misjudged you." No. Boss, I'm sincere. Don't misunderstand." Chen Feng defended himself. The experience of setting up the stall in the 100 Flowers Valley had left a deep impression on him. At that time, he was so poor that he didn't even have enough to pay for the stall. Now, his storage bag was filled with top-quality spirit stones worth 100,000 high-quality spirit stones. Moreover, his boss was an idol to him. "Are you sure?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. Chen Feng patted his chest and said, "I'm absolutely sincere. Sister Bai is here to testify." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu's face immediately changed into a smile. He patted his shoulder and said, "Good job. I knew I didn't choose the wrong person. Don't worry. One day, you'll find out that your choice was right." The 3 men finally had smiles on their faces. The little misunderstanding just now was gone in an instant. Yu Qianqiu patted their shoulders at the same time and said, "That's right. Only when you're good, and I'm good, will everyone be good. All right, you guys go get ready. I still have something to do outside." Then, he turned to Bai Sujin and said, "Sister, I'll be leaving first." The latter nodded, and Yu Qianqiu disappeared in front of the 3 of them. As soon as he came out of the room, he saw Ling Feng and the other 2. The 3 of them were already used to Yu Qianqiu's mysterious appearance. They immediately stood up and greeted, "Yu Shu. Sai. These 3 unlucky kids are still in the Qi training stage. I really want to help you guys get out of this abyss of suffering, but it's better to grind it out. The rainbow after the storm is the most beautiful. At that time, people will truly know what it means to be grateful." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no need for formalities. He smiled and said, "You're all back. I didn't see you guys on the way here, so I took a nap. Is everyone all right?" Ling Feng smiled bitterly and said, "What's good about it? It's still the same." "I don't think so." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the 3 of them and said with a meaningful smile, "Deacon Yin is staying in the demon domain and won't be able to return. I believe the situation will improve." He then added in his heart, "This daddy has personally blasted his head into smithereens, so he definitely won't be able to return." Ling Feng smiled non-committally and said, "Let's not talk about him. It's just spoiling the mood." On the other hand, everyone in supporting Immortal Island knows about Martial Uncle saving the disciples of various sects from the hands of the Ghost King. Even if 3 of us benefited from living with you, many people came to us to ask about you. Martial Uncle, tell us about what happened in Demonic Ghost Region." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He didn't know that he was already famous. He then waved his hand and said, I was just lucky. There's really nothing to talk about. That's it. I still have something to do. Let's talk next time. As he spoke, he had already flown away on his sword. Sigh. Looking at the departing figure, Ling Feng and the other two sighed at the same time. When they came back to their senses, they looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. They couldn't help it. The gap between them and him was getting bigger and bigger. There was no need to mention the things that happened in the past. Every time Yu Qianqiu came to Wanfen Garden, Ferdinand always had a sullen face as if he owed him a lot of money. This time, the sun rose from the west, and he kept nodding and smiling as soon as he saw Yu Qianqiu. There were two reasons. First, Ko Xiuhua and the others had told him in detail about their experience in demonic ghost region. It could be said that the three disciples of Wanfen Garden were saved by Yu Qianqiu. Just because of this, he was embarrassed to show his sullen face to Ferdinand. Second, he finally had an explanation for his daughter. But in Yu Qianqiu's eyes, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that there was a conspiracy. So, he tried to say something that usually made Ferdinand angry. Elder Ferdinand, I'm a little hungry. Do you have anything to eat here? Ferdinand suddenly smiled a little awkwardly. This kid really treated this place as a restaurant. His face twitched as he said, There is something at the back. It's not right to agree so readily. Yu Qianqiu also said for the first time, Thank you, Elder Ferdinand. Then, he followed him to the back of the main hall. As a result, as soon as he turned the corner, he met Furong, who came after hearing the sound. She hurried and shouted, Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Ha, senior sister, I'm hungry. Furong nodded repeatedly and turned to run back. She probably went to prepare something to eat. Ferdinand's face completely darkened. Yu Qianqiu glanced at it and heaved a sigh of relief. He was in the mood to eat first. Ignoring him, he took a familiar turn to Furong's place. Furong was busy putting more food on the table. Of course, he sat down without hesitation and ate to his heart's content. It would be a waste if he didn't eat. Ferdinand, who came in later, stared at him for a while and suddenly asked, I heard that you made a lot of noise in the monster ghost region this time. Even Ghost General drank and chatted with you? Furong tilted her small ears to listen. Yu Qianqiu also had something on his mind. As he ate, he replied, It can't be said to be drinking and chatting merrily. We just drank a few cups. Ghost General is too polite. Ghost General is too polite? Ferdinand's face twitched involuntarily. He had also trained in the monster ghost region. How could he not know the reputation of Ghost General? He was an overlord. Now that he had confirmed the rumors, he was inexplicably shocked. He really couldn't understand what was so good about this guy. His daughter was obedient to him, but why would someone like Ghost General also listen to him? He paused and asked again, I heard that you went deep into the hinterland of the monster ghost region and collected many spiritual herbs that even the disciples of Wanfen Garden have never seen before. Don't you know the rules of Fuxian Island? All the spiritual herbs collected in the monster ghost region must be handed over to the sect. Of course, we won't let you hand them over for nothing. The sect will give you a certain reward. Take them out and let me have a look. No wonder I felt strange. It turns out that you are after my spiritual herbs. I can't give them to you. They're all spiritual herbs with names on the elixir prescriptions. I still have a use for them. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and smiled at Furong. Senior sister, can you go out for a while? I have something to say to Elder Fei. Furong pinched the corner of her clothes and turned it over and over again. She was obviously a little unwilling, but in the end, she still went out obediently. Ferdinand didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a long time, he heard him say lightly, I just used them today. Immediately, he was so angry that he pointed his finger and shouted, How dare you? Do you still have any respect for the sect rules? He was indeed angry. Every principal elder of Wanfen Garden was proud of being able to add a few spiritual herbs to Wanfen Garden. This guy had collected so many rare spiritual herbs, but used them privately. How could he not be angry? Why are you so noisy? Yu Qianqiu suddenly stood up and smashed the chicken drumstick in his hand on the ground. He pointed at him and shouted angrily, Do you think I feel good every time I come here to eat because of your face? Do you know why I didn't agree to let Gu stay in the mulberry garden? Do you really think I'm stupid? Don't I know that mulberry garden is better than the alchemy pavilion? Do you think I'm comfortable in the alchemy pavilion? Do you think I'm a genius for creating my own alchemy technique in alchemy? That's what I often spend more than 10 days to figure out. Why is that? Because I saw that you, as a useless father, wanted to personally refine a good pill to treat senior sister's face. So I risked my life to go deep into the hinterland to collect spiritual herbs, even though I knew that the demon ghost region was very dangerous. Now that I've put in so much effort and thought, God didn't disappoint my painstaking efforts and finally refined a healing pill. I couldn't wait to come here, but I was ridiculed by you. I finally know what it means to be cruel and unscrupulous. In fact, Farong didn't go far and just stayed outside. When she heard this, she covered her mouth with tears and tried hard not to cry out. Ferdinand was also confused by his extreme reaction at first, but at this time he said in a trembling voice, "You mean you've already refined a pill that can treat Farong's face?" Yu Qianqiu was still not satisfied with the scolding and said sternly, "I've never seen such a heartless thing like you. I did collect a lot of spiritual herbs in the demon ghost region, but I didn't give them to the sect. I used them to refine pills. So what? I even gave up my life for senior sister, so why would I be afraid of an old man like you?" As he spoke, he took out a 7-colored spirit pill from his bag of holding and shouted, "I don't have any spirit herbs, only a refined spirit pill. Old thing, if you have the ability, then go against your conscience and hand this spirit pill over to the sect. I want to see if your conscience has really been eaten by a dog." Chapter 134. The soft, colorful glow of the Rui pill lit up the entire room slightly, and a faint and unique fragrance slowly spread. Ferdinand's pupils suddenly widened. He took a step forward and directly grabbed the elixir in his hand. He put it in front of his eyes to look at it. After a while, he snorted and said, "It's really an elixir. This elixir is dizzy." His face was full of disbelief. Yu Qianqiu looked on coldly, and a smile flashed unintentionally in his eyes, but it disappeared slightly. At this time, Farong slowly walked in and walked to Yu Qianqiu's side. She held his arm tightly with both hands and stared at Ferdinand with extreme resentment. Yu Qianqiu felt the elasticity on his arm and looked at her with some surprise. He did not expect that a girl who was as thin as firewood would actually have a peerless treasure. Some things really needed to be understood in depth, and it could not be seen just from the surface. At the same time, he also noticed the resentment in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu could not help but open his mouth slightly. He looked back at Ferdinand, who was still amazed, and said in his heart, "Old man, I'm sorry. I just want you to owe me a big favor so that I can extort something in the future. I really did not mean to sow discord between you father and daughter." "Hey!" He raised his hand and gently patted Farong's little hand that was a little pale. "This elixir can really cure Farong's face." Halfway through his words, Ferdinand looked up and found that his daughter was holding the man's arm in front of her chest. His face was distorted. That place is not for other men to touch. Taking advantage of someone else's daughter in front of him, the pressure he was under was really not ordinary. Yu Qianqiu quickly diverted his attention and sneered. "Don't you want to use the sect rules to suppress me? Who cares if it can be cured or not? Just give it to the sect directly." When Ferdinand heard this, he immediately noticed that his daughter was looking at him with an almost resentful gaze. He trembled all over and almost dropped the elixir in his hand. He stuttered, Farong, I didn't mean that. Take it and try it. Maybe it will work." As he spoke, he handed the elixir over with trembling hands. However, Farong held Yu Qianqiu's arm tightly and took a step back. She bit her lips hard and stared at Ferdinand. The latter felt his hair stand on end, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. Even with his cultivation base, there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. In the end, he looked at Yu Qianqiu pleadingly. "What a pitiful parent. Old thing, now you know the consequences of challenging me. Things started because of him, so he had to find a way to resolve it. Otherwise, Ferdinand would hate him to death." Yu Qianqiu turned around and grabbed the little hand on his arm, whispering, "Senior Marshal sister, since your father wants you to give it a try, you should give it a try." Ferdinand's mind was already in a mess, and his body was covered in cold sweat. Hearing that, he nodded at Hibiscus. However, Hibiscus shook her head hard and said, "I don't have a father. I don't want to cure it." It was rare for her to speak, but when she did, it was very scary. Yu Qianqiu was shocked to find that there was a touch of red on her lips. It was obvious that she had bitten it just now. He could not help but be stunned and a little stunned. Hearing that, Ferdinand suddenly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His face instantly turned pale, and he staggered back a few steps. That touch of red almost broke his heart. Damn it, this is too much. If this goes on, old Phil will fight with me after this. Yu Qianqiu immediately pulled his arm out of that plump and short-of-breath chest. He took the elixir from Ferdinand's hand and gave it to Hibiscus. He said softly, "Senior Marshal sister, your father really didn't mean that. Don't misunderstand. It will be good for you to take it." "No." Hibiscus spat out a word forcefully. She shook her head and retreated until she leaned against the wall. She still shook her head and refused. He had never seen this girl have the courage to refuse anyone. He did not expect that she would refuse so unhesitatingly today. She must be really sad. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that he had gone too far today. There was really no need to hurt her. He let out a depressed breath and said in a deep voice, "Senior Marshal sister, do you believe me?" "Yes." Hibiscus looked at him with her bright eyes and nodded. "Then do you believe what I said?" "Yes." "Good." Yu Qianqiu walked over and pulled Ferdinand over with one hand. He pointed at him and said, "Then I will tell you. Look carefully. This person is your biological father. He is the person who treats you the best in the world. No one can treat you better than him, including me. You have to believe that everything he does is for your good. Senior Marshal sister, can you understand?" Hibiscus did not say anything. She neither nodded nor shook her head. Ferdinand, who was casually grabbed like a child, looked at Yu Qianqiu with gratitude instead. "Senior Marshal sister, this elixir was refined for you. It was really not easy for me to refine it. I really spent a lot of effort. Could it be that Senior Marshal sister really has the heart to let my efforts go to waste?" As Yu Qianqiu spoke, he sent the fragrant elixir with colorful rays of light in his hand to her. It was one thing to help Ferdinand be a good person once, but he still had to be a good person himself. This was his habit. Facing Yu Qianqiu's extremely sincere gaze, Hibiscus hesitated. Finally, she summoned up her courage and timidly reached out her little hand to take the elixir. She lowered her head and gently put it into her mouth. With a slight gurgling sound, she swallowed it. The two men breathed a sigh of relief and glanced at each other with relief. Ferdinand's excitement could be clearly seen on his face. The two of them looked at Hibiscus again. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu really did not know whether this elixir would have the miraculous effect described on the Jade archive. This was also the reason why he had not taken the elixir yet. Hibiscus was also silently feeling the changes of the elixir in her stomach. Just like that, the three of them hugged each other by the wall, not daring to breathe heavily. Fortunately, there were no outsiders to see this strange scene. Otherwise, if two men were to force a woman against the wall, anyone's imagination would run wild. After an hour or so, Hibiscus's body finally showed some changes. First, her whole body turned red. Then, on her face, hands, neck, and all the exposed skin pores gradually oozed out a jet-black liquid. A foul smell began to spread in the room. Hibiscus looked at Yu Qianqiu with a somewhat panicked expression. She kept wiping the dirt oozing out of the back of her hands on her clothes. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched a little. Ferdinand, on the other hand, shouted in surprise, "Hibiscus, don't move. The elixir is taking effect." After all, he was very experienced. He could see the reason at a glance. Sure enough, not long after, the foul smell began to be dispelled by the delicate fragrance emitted from Hibiscus's body. Then, the fragrance became stronger and stronger. Hibiscus's stomach began to make gurgling sounds, and she seemed to be restless. Ferdinand suddenly revealed a look of realization. He slapped his forehead, turned his head, and anxiously shouted, "Somebody, somebody! Somebody come quickly!" Two female disciples quickly came over. They did not know what had happened to make the elder-in-chief so urgently summon them. Without waiting for them to salute, Ferdinand ordered the two of them, "You take Hibiscus to the toilet to detoxify. You quickly go and prepare a large amount of hot water for her bath. Be quick." When the two of them saw Hibiscus, who was wrapped in a layer of black to the point that she could no longer be identified, they immediately understood. One of them left in a flash, while the other carried Hibiscus out without any fear of getting dirty. Ferdinand was obviously very excited. He kept clapping his fists and walking back and forth in the room. Detoxify in the toilet? Damn, the side effect of this Rui pill is even worse than the foundation-building pill. I wonder if Big Sister has taken it yet. With this thought in mind, Yu Qianzhou's divine sense unconsciously entered Utopia. Very soon, he locked onto a graceful figure by the distant lake. In the clear lake, the delicate body that was as fair as jade created layers of ripples. She got up from the water and walked to the shore. Her peerless face was extremely pure and serene. The water droplets that slid down her plump and upright breasts splashed onto the lake's surface bit by bit. The two spots of red were mesmerizing, and countless traces of water slid down her smooth skin and elongated. Suddenly, her two jade-like arms pushed her wet black hair to the back, and her graceful figure was immediately revealed. Chapter 135. Yu Qianzhou was shocked and immediately withdrew his divine sense. He took a deep breath and tried hard to dispel the lingering reverie in his mind. After his mood stabilized, he shook his head secretly. There was a kind of woman who was a confidant in his heart. When the two were together, there was no worry, and the body and mind were relaxed and peaceful. It was a piece of pure land in a man's heart that could not be desecrated. Bai Suzhen was his confidant. She believed that if he wanted her body, she would not refuse. This method of peeping could be used on any woman, but it was not suitable for her. After more than 4 hours, the female disciple who was ordered to prepare the bath water suddenly rushed in and said excitedly, "Elder Fei, senior sister Ferong, you should go and have a look." "Got it." Ferdinand waved his hand and then turned back to glare at Yu Qianzhou fiercely. Then he hurried out. It seemed to tell him that if anything happened to his daughter, just wait and see. Yu Qianzhou judged from the female disciple's expression that it was probably a good thing. Otherwise, she would not be so excited, so he followed her. The two came to a side room one after another. As soon as they entered, Ferdinand suddenly stopped. Yu Qianzhou flashed out from behind him and was also stunned there. A woman was sitting in front of the bronze mirror in a trance. She kept rubbing her face with her palm. When she saw someone coming in, she slowly turned her head and revealed her beautiful appearance. "Damn, this beauty is Ferong?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened. The beauty in front of him blocked her face, but her figure was indeed Ferong's figure. It was just that her face seemed to have changed into another person, which was very different from before. Ferdinand trembled all over and nodded with tears in his old eyes. She looks like your mother." Yu Qianzhou looked at him suspiciously. "No wonder you have an affair with your wife. It turns out that your lover is more beautiful than your wife." "Yu Qianzhou." Ferong stood up and shouted shyly. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. "So, senior martial sister's original appearance is this beautiful? Ha, I really didn't expect that." Thinking of the time when he called her ugly in the mulberry garden, he really felt a little embarrassed. Ferong immediately lowered her head shyly. A female disciple on the side said, "Elder, I'll help Shiji comb her hair." Ferdinand wiped his tears happily, laughed, and said, all right, let's go out." After saying that, he also pulled Yu Qianzhou out. As soon as the two of them came out and walked back to the original room, Ferdinand suddenly turned around and stared at Yu Qianzhou. The smile on his face disappeared. After a long time, he said, "How many elixirs have you refined in this furnace?" Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly in his heart. It seemed like his daughter's face had been cured. Now that she had nothing to worry about, she wanted to fall out with him. Without changing his expression, he said, "Originally, one furnace was supposed to refine 10 pills, but in the end, 9 pills were wasted. Fortunately, there was still 1 pill left, otherwise, senior sister's face." As he said this, he shook his head. 9 out of 10 pills were wasted? Ferdinand raised his eyebrows and didn't show that he believed it. He turned to the side and said leisurely, "I'm afraid it's not an ordinary spirit herb. Otherwise, it definitely won't have such a miraculous effect. Yes, I believe that senior sister's face can stay young forever." Yu Qianqiu replied lightly. Ferdinand turned around and said, "What kind of spirit herb is it? It can actually stay young forever?" If Ghost General is right, I believe that not only can it stay young forever, but it can also be immune to all kinds of poisons in the future. Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said slowly, "Ghost General said that the spirit herb is called a dumbra flower. I don't know if Elder Ferdinand has heard of it." Ferdinand's body shook and his eyes lit up. After a long time, he returned to normal and sighed. "Treat Furong better. If there's anything I can help with in the future, don't hesitate to find me." "Oomph. If you know about the Adumbra flower, you should know that it can't be cultivated. Your daughter has already used it, and you still want to bully me? You should know better than me the consequences of using this kind of heaven and earth treasure privately. Old thing, you have to return the favor you owe." Yu Qianqiu nodded calmly and said, "Got it. I'll go back first." After the incident in the demon domain, Fuxian Island gradually returned to normal. In the elixir refinery pavilion, Yu Qianqiu was undoubtedly the most free person. Without Yin Shu's constraints, no one cared about him. In addition, he was famous and was Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, so the elixir refinery pavilion let him do whatever he wanted and didn't arrange anything for him to do. He also kept a low profile and acted alone. He always had a smile when facing everyone, didn't fight with anyone, and didn't conflict with anyone. He was often very generous. As for the disciples of the other branches, he almost didn't interact with them, other than a disciple called Cheng Gengxing from the Secular Objects Hall, who often looked for him. There was also Gu Qingyun from the Cultivation Pavilion. In short, Yu Qianqiu had completely entered a period of hibernation. Behind the scenes that others couldn't see, he was abnormally busy. First, he spent a few months building a majestic hall on the tallest mountain in Utopia. After that, other than concentrating on cultivation, he accompanied Guan Yu to train the troops. In the process, there were definitely some who were disobedient, and by Suzhen immediately turned them into ashes. It had to be said that sometimes killing the chicken to warn the monkey was very useful. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu constantly educated these people on political and ideological issues. Coupled with the generous treatment of spirit stones and spirit pills, the morale of the troops gradually stabilized. Of course, some necessary measures were unavoidable. As for the usual training, he rarely interfered. Instead, he often spent time to change Guan Yu's mindset and taught him alone. His requirement for Guan Yu was that the most important aspect of this small army was their quality. They had to be proficient in assassinations, ambushes, and all sorts of other effective combat methods to kill the enemy. They had to be able to achieve victory once they were deployed. Guan Yu's enthusiasm for these things was also unexpected. He threw himself into it wholeheartedly, and the various special warfare and training methods that Yu Qianqiu explained were even more astonishing. All kinds of advanced ideas and concepts were things that he had never thought of. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu gave Guan Yu a warning. The soldiers are fierce, but the generals are fierce. After the training of the troops got on track, Yu Qianqiu began to spend a lot of time on Chun Feng, personally teaching him alchemy and researching weapon refinement and talisman creation. The method and materials for weapon refinement were bought by Cheng Gengxing from outside. Of course, he also gave him a lot of money for running errands. Cheng Gengxing was never tired of such a good thing. Anyway, it was on the way. As long as you don't talk about it, it's good for everyone. In the blink of an eye, it was time for supporting Immortal Island to distribute the Foundation Establishment pills. Yu Qianqiu diverted some of his attention to Ling Feng and the other two. As expected, the three of them did not disappoint him, and all failed. Naturally, the three of them would be expelled from supporting Immortal Island. Yu Qianqiu sat on a stone bench and looked at the three dejected people in front of him. Behind him stood a peerless beauty who was gently massaging his back. This person was none other than Hibiscus. Ever since the scar on her face was healed, Hibiscus finally had the courage to come out and meet people. However, the way she came out was often a straight line. She would go back and forth between Wanfeng Garden and Yu Qianqiu's residence. In her eyes, Yu Qianqiu was the only person she could trust. Chapter 136. Every time she came, she would bring some of Yu Qianqiu's favorite food. Once, Yu Qianqiu suddenly said, "Furong, you have to improve your cultivation. Maybe I'll need your help in the future." Therefore, other than the appointment time with Yu Qianqiu, Furong spent the rest of her time on cultivation. With the help of the medicinal pills personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, she successfully broke through to the core formation stage. As a result, Ferdinand was overjoyed. It was naturally a good thing to have someone to supervise his daughter's cultivation. In the cultivation world, what was more practical than improving one's own strength? Therefore, he was happy to see his daughter run to Yu Qianqiu. Moreover, he also knew that his daughter would not be able to leave Yu Qianqiu in this life. He also accepted his fate. "When are you leaving?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them and smiled. Ling Feng sighed. "Sigh, I've woken up from my dream. It's time to leave. I think it'll be in a few days." Yu Qianqiu patted Furong on his shoulder and signaled Furong to stop and rest. Furong obediently leaned behind him and looked at the four people sitting around with her bright eyes innocently. Ling Feng and the other two secretly sighed. Look at what kind of life she led. The dignified daughter of the Wanfeng Garden's principal elder personally patted her back. Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. The table was filled with snacks brought by Furong. After Yu Qianqiu personally filled the 4 wine glasses on the table, he asked, "What are your plans after leaving?" The three of them looked at each other and shook their heads with a bitter smile. Ling Feng said with a bleak expression, "The three of us were orphans. We were brought to Fuxian Island when we were young and never left. Now we don't even know what the outside world is like. After leaving, we really don't know what to do. You don't want to walk the path of cultivation anymore?" Yu Qianqiu held a wine glass and asked. Ling Feng shook her head. "There's no chance. There will never be a chance. 3 foundation establishment pills can't help a disciple who is expelled from the sect. Which sect in the cultivation world would take any abandoned disciples of supporting Immortal Island?" Hearing this, Baizi picked up the wine cup in front of her and drained it in one gulp. She actually shed tears and cried, "Martial uncle, I really can't accept this. I really can't accept this." Xian Ping drank a cup of wine in a muffled voice. Yu Qianqiu filled up their cups again and said with a smile, "What if we still have a chance after we get out of here? Do you guys want some?" The three of them shuddered and looked at him. Ling Feng pondered for a moment and stood up in surprise. "Does Martial Uncle have a clear path? If you can guide us, the three of us are willing to follow Martial Uncle's orders from now on." Yu Qianqiu smiled without saying a word. He glanced at the other two and raised his cup to drink. Baizi and Xian Ping immediately stood up and said, "Martial Uncle, please show us the way. We are willing to listen to your orders. It's good to talk to smart people." Yu Qianqiu gave them a thumbs up. Then he took out a small white porcelain bottle that was sealed and used to store pills and placed it on the table. He said with a smile, "If the three of you still want to succeed in building your foundation, after you leave supporting Immortal Island, bring this bottle to the capital of Huaxia Empire as soon as possible. Go to the Pillar of State General's office and find a person called Shi Xiaotian. He is the 3rd young master of the general's office. After you find him, tell him that I told you to find him. He will naturally arrange a place for you to stay and wait patiently. When the time comes, someone will come to help you build your foundation. Remember this well, and don't forget it." The three of them were pleasantly surprised. They looked at each other and didn't know if this was true or not. Ling Feng took a deep breath and held the porcelain bottle in his hand. This was their only chance. Whether it was true or not, They had to give it a try. He repeated Yu Qianshou's words again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he nodded and said, "Martial uncle, we will remember your words. It's good that you remember it. You will have to grasp the opportunity yourselves." Yu Qianshou then nodded and gestured for the three of them to sit down. He said, "I heard that there are more than 10 disciples expelled from supporting Immortal Island. If possible, it is best to bring them with you. Consider this a test. Don't let the others know." The three of them exchanged glances and nodded. "Martial uncle, we understand." A few days later, in front of Penglai Pavilion's main hall, more than 10 dejected disciples boarded their flying magic tools under the supervision of 2 disciples from the Secular Object Hall. These disciples had stayed on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, but they didn't even have anyone to send them off. On the contrary, Ling Feng and the other 2 had Yu Qianshou and Furong to send them off. Seeing this miserable scene, Yu Qianshou couldn't help but sigh at the fickleness of the cultivation world. One of the 2 disciples from the Secular Objects Hall was Cheng Gengqing. Yu Qianshou smiled at him and said, "The 3 of them have lived in the same courtyard with me for many years. You have also seen them many times, so you can be considered acquaintances. Please take care of them on the way. They have old friends in the capital that they're going to seek refuge with. If it is convenient, try to get them to stay close to the capital." "I know. You are so garrulous like an old woman." Cheng Gengqing punched him, and at the same time, he looked at Furong behind Cheng Gengqing meaningfully and shook his head with a smile. Ling Feng and the other 2 bowed gratefully and said, "Thank you, Martial Uncle, for sending us off." Yu Qianshou waved his hand and pointed at Cheng Gengqing. "Don't thank me, thank him. We still need him to take care of us on the way. Go, go, go. Don't listen to him. Hurry up and go up. There are people watching over there." Cheng Gengqing pouted in the direction of Penglai Pavilion and pushed the 3 of them onto the flying magic tool. After watching a stream of light fly into the sky, Yu Qianshou led Furong back to the small courtyard on his sword. With the 3 of them gone, the place suddenly felt a lot more deserted. Yu Qianshou sat down on the stone bench and pulled Furong onto his lap. Feeling the elasticity of the heavy weight, he wrapped his arms around her slender waist and caressed her. The latter panicked and pressed his hand down, saying, "Qianshou, don't. Someone will see." "So it's like that." Yu Qianshou pondered for a while and suddenly carried her up, saying, "Then let's go to my room. No one will see there." This caused the latter to scream in fear. Rushing into the room, he closed the door with his foot and threw Furong onto the bed. The 2 of them laughed and played with each other until their clothes were in a mess. In the end, they had touched all the places they wanted to touch. However, Yu Qianshou still did not take off her clothes to make the final breakthrough. It was not that he did not want to do it, but when he wanted to do it, Furong always said that she was afraid. Therefore, Yu Qianshou vowed, "I won't force you. When you are not afraid one day, tell me." From then on, every time this happened, Yu Qianshou would want to slap himself twice. He really didn't know if he was possessed or what was going on. He actually made such an oath, and now he could only slap himself. Thinking about how he was still a virgin after coming to this world for so long, damn. Furong, who was blushing, lazily lay in Yu Qianshou's arms and said, "Qianshou, Father wants me to tell you that Fushin Island will send more disciples to the Cultivation Alliance in a while." Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianshou's expression darkened. He sat up. Back in Ong Kwangsong, after his master House Sansi was killed by the Deluo Sect, he had handed the matter over to the Cultivation Alliance to handle. In the end, it was left unsettled. He still remembered it. In front of the Pillar of State General's residence in the capital of Huaxia Empire, a dozen travel-worn people gathered at the entrance. They sized up the extraordinary residence and looked at the 3 people in front of them in confusion. The person in the lead walked up and knocked on the door knocker. After a while, the door was opened. A servant who was guarding the door walked out and asked with a frown, "Who are you looking for?" "We are looking for the 3rd young master of your residence, Shi Xiaotian." The person in the lead smiled and said. The servant looked at them again and asked doubtfully, "Do you know our 3rd young master?" "No, we don't. Please help us inform him that his old friend, Yu Qianshou, asked us to personally bring something to him. Yu Qianshou. The servant scratched his head as if he had heard this name before, but he could not remember where. However, his attitude immediately became much better. He nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment. I will go inform him now." After saying that, he closed the door again. The crowd did not wait for long before they heard hurried running sound from inside. Someone shouted, open the door, and welcome the guest." The person outside the door immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 137. The group of people at the entrance was none other than the disciples of Supporting Immortals Island who had failed to reach Foundation establishment and were expelled from a sect. Leading them was Ling Feng and the other two. They followed Yu Qianshou's instructions and brought them to the Pillar General's residence. Most of these people had spiritual roots and were brought to Supporting Immortals Island from a young age. Many years had passed, and the youngest among them had not interacted with the secular world for close to 20 years. They were expelled from the sect and had nowhere to go. With Ling Feng and the other two leading the way, they naturally followed them. However, Ling Feng and the other two did not tell them that they were under Yu Qianshou's arrangements. When they heard the conversation between Ling Feng and the gatekeeper and found out that Yu Qianshou was involved, they looked at each other in astonishment. Seeing such a rich and powerful residence, the three of them could not help but feel a trace of apprehension. They were a little suspicious of Yu Qianshou's words. The Pillar General was similar to the Wei and Ping generals. The military power of the Xia Empire was divided among the three of them. Their status was not something ordinary people could hope to achieve. They had heard of this before and did not believe that Yu Qianshou would be related to such a person. However, since things had come to this, they could only brace themselves and give it a try. When they heard the shout from inside, the three of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was clear that Yu Qianshou's name was indeed effective. The vermilion-red door of the residence let out a dull sound and quickly opened. 2 rows of servants stood on either side. A handsome young man with a golden crown in his hair and embroidered robes with a jade belt around his waist walked out and looked around joyfully. When he saw the travel-worn appearance of the group, he was slightly taken aback. He paused for a moment before asking doubtfully, "I am sure Xiaotian, are you all looking for me?" When he heard the servant's report, he did not think much of it. He felt that the servant was looking down on him. At this moment, he also suspected that these people were sent by that person. Otherwise, why would they be in such a sorry state? After being in a rich and powerful family for so long, he had forgotten how he looked when he returned from Ong Kwangsung. He was even worse than them. The expression of the servant who went to report sank. They had actually lied to him. They grew up overseas and did not have much experience. This was the first time they saw such a dignified young master. Looking at themselves, they felt a little resentful. Ling Feng cupped his fist and said, "You are sure Xiaotian. It is Uncle Master Yu Qianshou who ordered us to find you." Uncle Master, sure Xiaotian looked him up and down. He seemed to be slightly older than Yu Qianshou. He was a little worried, so he probed, "Where are you from?" Supporting Immortals Island, Ling Feng said with a little pride. As soon as he said this, everyone became confident. Although they were expelled from the sect, the position of the sect was enough for them to be proud of. The name of the number 1 sect in the cultivation world was not just for show. Sure sect of sect, of the sect of the other sect. Excited. Sure sect, out of the sect, disciples sect of the sect of the sect, of the other of sect. As he spoke, he looked at the servants on both sides, extended his hand, and made an inviting gesture. "This is not the place to talk. Everyone, please follow me." The decency of a wealthy family in the secular world was indeed a big blow to these people. It was a completely different concept from the fairyland of the Supporting Immortals Island. Perhaps it was because they had stayed in the Supporting Immortals Island for a long time, but their sense of beauty had completely changed. They were a little surprised by the luxury of the general's residence. They constantly looked around and praised in their hearts. Sure Xiaotian didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. Not only did he lead the way, he also kept making inviting gestures. Sometimes, the servants passing by couldn't help but glance at him. Why was the third young master so polite to a bunch of country bumpkins? The former led everyone to the back garden where Yu Qianshou used to live. However, it had become his residence now, and the garden was still a forbidden area. Other than him, no one was allowed to enter. In the small courtyard of the back garden, the pile of spirit stones that Yu Qianshou left for him was still there. Even though everyone came from the world's #1 cultivation sect, they had never seen such a big pile of spirit stones before. Moreover, these were just some ordinary disciples. They were all speechless. As expected of a wealthy family, even the spirit stones were exposed so casually. However, they didn't know Shi Xiaoyan's pain. Seeing these spirit stones every day was torture to him. In the cultivation world, it was a good thing, but in the secular world, people would have to think twice before exchanging it for a meal. Moreover, Shi Xiaoyan hadn't built his foundation, so he didn't dare to absorb the spiritual energy inside. Normally, he only dared to look at it, but didn't dare to use it. After inviting the guests from the supporting Immortals Island to sit in the hall, Shi Xiaoyan impatiently asked Ling Feng, "Old, why didn't your martial uncle you come? What did he ask you to bring me?" The first thing that came to his mind was the foundation building pill. Ling Feng told him what Yu Qianshou wanted him to find Shi Xiaoyan. Then he took out the porcelain bottle that he carefully kept and gave it to Shi Xiaoyan. Once Shi Xiaoyan received it, he immediately opened the seal and poured the contents in his palm a few times. However, he realized that there was nothing inside. He couldn't help but look at Ling Feng in confusion. Ling Feng and the other two's expressions changed as well. It was actually an empty bottle. Yu Qianshou actually asked them to bring an empty bottle as a gift. Shi Xiaoyan squinted his eyes and looked into the bottle. There was indeed nothing inside. He then put it under his nose and sniffed it. He couldn't help but frown. There was nothing inside other than the smell of blood. He slowly raised his head and looked at the crowd. He said indifferently, "What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to fool me? Or is the thing inside the bottle being hidden by someone? Give me an explanation." He had been a person of status for a long time. When he was serious, he could indeed put some pressure on others. The atmosphere in the hall became heavy. The other disciples also looked at Ling Feng and the other two. Ling Feng snatched the bottle from his hand. After checking it again, he realized that there was nothing inside. He muttered, "How can this be? I've never opened the bottle before. Could it be that martial uncle you gave us an empty bottle? He came all the way here to deliver such a small, empty bottle? Do you really think I'm an idiot?" Shi Xiaoyan glanced at everyone coldly and said in a deep voice, "I think everyone should first prove your identity. Otherwise, my general's residence isn't a place that you can come and go as you please. Speak. Who are you people? How do you know that I know Yu Qianshou?" He shouted, "Yo, I haven't seen you for a few years. Your temper has grown." Suddenly, a mocking voice came from the back of the hall. Shi Xiaoyan suddenly turned around and shouted, "Who is it? Get out here." Following a burst of laughter, a person swayed out from the back of the hall. He stared at Shi Xiaoyan with a smile and sighed. "You have guts. You actually dare to speak to me like this. Why? Can't you recognize my voice after being separated for a few years?" Everyone stood up. This person wasn't a stranger to everyone. He was a famous person on supporting Immortals Island. He was once an honored guest of the State Pillar General's residence. He was Yu Qianshou. All the disciples bowed and said, "Martial Uncle Yu." Ling Feng and the other two looked at him in disbelief. Wasn't he on supporting Immortals Island? How did he come here in a blink of an eye? Boss," Shi Xiaoyan said in shock. Yu Qianshou raised his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. He turned to Shi Xiaoyan and patted his shoulder with a smile. "Young man, you have quite a temper. How dare you shout at me?" I, Shi Xiaoyan stuttered for a long time. In the end, he bowed with a surprised expression. "Boss." Yu Qianshou turned around with a smile. He walked to the chair in the main hall and sat down. He looked at everyone. Chapter 138. Seeing everyone's doubtful expressions, Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. In fact, he had already heard the conversation between him and Shi Xiaotian. His gaze landed on the porcelain bottle in Ling Feng's hand, and his smile widened. He had been cultivating arduously for more than a year, trying to make various breakthroughs. One time, he had cultivated the Guiyuan sword technique, wanted to make a breakthrough, but in his anxiety, he had ended up injuring himself. When he returned to supporting Immortal Island, he realized that there were bloodstains on his clothes, so he casually tossed them down the Alchemy Pavilion's mountain and did not take it to heart. A few days later, when he was cultivating in Utopia, he unintentionally realized that he could sense the scene in an unfamiliar place outside. This feeling could only be felt when he had entered Utopia the last time. Curious, he locked onto it with his divine sense and tried using the method to exit. In the end, he discovered that he was already in the back mountain of the Alchemy Pavilion. When he discovered the blood-stained shirt that he had abandoned previously, he immediately thought of a possibility. He reckoned that it was a benefit brought about by his cultivation breaking through again. Therefore, he dripped his blood in several places on supporting Immortal Island to test it out. Indeed, he could easily sense the surroundings of every drop of blood essence in Utopia. After repeated attempts, he could use Utopia as a medium to quickly appear where there was blood essence. The porcelain bottle that he had asked Ling Feng and the other two to bring did not contain anything other than a drop of his blood essence. His main purpose was to test Utopia's long-distance teleportation ability. He had asked the three of them to bring that drop of blood essence to the National Pillar General's residence, which was why he could appear here. Of course, this was his secret, and it was not convenient for him to let the people in front of him know. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Ling Feng and the other two and said indifferently, "Ling Feng, I remember the three of you saying that as long as I can help you succeed in building your foundation, you'll be willing to listen to my orders. Does that still count?" The three of them looked at each other and thought about how Yu Qianqiu had been able to leave supporting Immortal Island secretly and appear here silently. Since he had such means, he was definitely not lying about building his foundation. Therefore, they bowed in unison and said, "Of course it counts." The other disciples were shocked when they heard that. Yu Qianqiu could actually help the three of them build their foundation. For a moment, everyone's thoughts became active, and they looked at the three of them enviously. Shi Xiaotian was also a little excited. Since Boss had the ability to help them build their foundations, he would naturally be able to help himself. However, he had been with Yu Qianqiu for more than a year and was very familiar with him. He knew that there was more to this sentence. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He looked at the others and smiled. "What are your plans? Are you willing to serve me like the other three?" Everyone looked at each other, their expressions becoming excited. Someone stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Martial Uncle Yu, if you can guarantee that this disciple will successfully build his foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle's orders. I always pay what I say." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "If you can't successfully build your foundation, you naturally don't need to listen to my orders, and you also don't need to take my words seriously. Go do what you need to do." "Huh, is there anyone among you who is willing to be like him?" As he said that, he took out a few foundation-building pills that were shrouded in purple mist. Everyone's eyes lit up. Apart from Shi Xiaotian, everyone had seen them before, so they naturally knew that these were foundation-building pills. Shi Xiaotian also naturally understood from everyone's gazes. In an instant, the crowd's emotions flared up. Who wouldn't want to make such a foolproof deal? Even if they couldn't successfully build their foundation, they wouldn't lose anything. They immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, "If we can successfully build our foundation, this disciple is willing to listen to Martial Uncle Yu's orders." Since there were foundation-building pills, Boss definitely wouldn't forget about them. Shi Xiaotian stood at the side very confidently, not saying a word. Good. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, but he snorted coldly in his heart. As expected, they were all people who refused to suffer losses. Each of them emphasized that they would only listen to his orders after they successfully built their foundation. They all thought that he was a philanthropist. Very good. He placed the few foundation-building pills in his hand on the tea table beside him. Then he took out a whole bunch and placed them on the table, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Words are no proof. Those who are willing to listen to my orders will first take one as proof. If one foundation-building pill is not enough, you can still come to me to take it." As he said that, he took out another handful from his storage bag. Sure, Xiaoyan's jaw dropped as he watched. He thought to himself, boss is indeed boss. The foundation-building pills that Ong Kwang-tsung treats as treasure are actually given out by boss as wedding candies. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and walked over to Yu Qianqiu and bowed deeply. When the latter nodded, he excitedly took one and retreated to the side, as if he was afraid that someone would snatch it from him. Sometimes, one was afraid that no one would take the lead. Since someone took the lead, everyone would naturally follow suit, taking turns to bow and salute, then unceremoniously took the pills and retreated. In the blink of an eye, there were only 11 foundation-building pills left on the tea table. Yu Qianqiu looked at Shi, Xiaotian, Ling Feng, and the other two who didn't follow the crowd's bad example. He smiled and said, "Xiaotian, take the foundation-building pills on the table and share them with those three brothers." For people actually had to share 11 foundation-building pills. Everyone's face was filled with envy. Yes, such a good thing. Sure, Xiaotian couldn't hold back the smile on his face anymore. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, no longer looking like a noble young master. Holding the foundation-building pills in his hand, he walked in front of Ling Feng and the other two. Without saying a word, he gave each of them 3 foundation-building pills. He held 2 and was about to retreat. Who knew that the 3 of them wouldn't take it? They each wanted to give one to Shi Xiaotian, but the latter was determined not to accept it. Looking at the adult version of Kong Rong, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. This daddy here has plenty of foundation-building pills. Why do I need you guys to be good people? His face darkened and he shouted, "All right, stop being disgusting." The 4 of them retreated embarrassedly. Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked around at everyone. Expressionlessly, he said, "I don't like empty promises. The foundation-building pills in everyone's hands are proof of my advance payment. But you guys can't just say empty promises. You have to show me some sincerity. What do you guys say?" Everyone looked at each other. They were all disciples who were chased out of Fuxian Island. Other than the pitiful amount of spirit stones they had, they really couldn't take out anything else to show their sincerity. They didn't know what to say. There really wasn't a free lunch in this world. Shi Xiaotian looked at the foundation-building pills in his hand. His face twitched unnaturally. Just as he took a step forward and called out, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "We'll talk about the 4 of you later." Huh! Nobody said anything. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms in front of his chest and smiled. "Then I'll take the initiative to ask you guys for something. Something that all of you have. How about it? Something that everyone has." Everyone looked at themselves and suddenly felt a chill run down their spines. A disciple came out and bowed. "Uncle Master, you. I wonder what we have that can catch your eye?" Haha, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not interested in your body parts. I just want something that doesn't matter. For example, Yu Qianqiu paused and smiled. For example, give me your natal primordial spirit. With this proof, I can be at ease. What? Everyone exclaimed. Their faces turned pale. If they handed over their natal primordial spirit, wouldn't their lives be in danger? That disciple bowed again and said, "Uncle Master, you're joking too much. If that's the case, then I don't want this foundation-building pill anymore." As he spoke, he walked to the side of the tea table and returned the foundation establishment pill. Then, a few more people gritted their teeth and walked out to return the foundation-building pill. The rest of them were obviously hesitant. Yu Qianqiu looked at them coldly and suddenly laughed. "You guys really don't stand on ceremony. You guys take my things as you please and return them as you please. Since you guys don't stand on ceremony, then I won't stand on ceremony either. All of you who took my foundation-building pill, leave your natal primordial spirit behind. Don't even think about leaving." Just as he finished speaking, Among the people who were still holding onto the foundation building pill, someone suddenly leaped out of the hall. In the blink of an eye, he was about to jump over the wall. It seemed like he wanted to escape with the pill. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and narrowed his eyes. Chapter 139. Clang! A cold light suddenly flashed in front of everyone's eyes, heading straight for the disciple who was about to jump over the wall. The cold light pierced through the person's figure, causing a flower of blood to blossom in the air. The disciple lost his balance and let out a miserable scream that echoed throughout the general's residence. Before the scream had even subsided, a second, third, fourth, one after another, cold lights flashed out from the hall. Their target was still the disciple who was still in the air. Nearly 100 cold lights swarmed over like a flock of crows fighting for food. In a few blinks of an eye, the scream stopped and the disciple could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a bloody mist in the air. The cold lights were faintly discernible, and occasionally, pieces of cloth would fall. Suddenly, nearly 100 cold lights seemed to have received an order and shot out from the bloody mist, shooting into the hall. Everyone followed the direction of the cold lights, and one by one, they entered the storage pouch on Yu Qianqiu's waist. One of the cold lights slowed down and turned into a flying sword that flew around Yu Qianqiu's body. After a few rounds, it flipped over and with a clang sound, it went straight into the sword sheath on Yu Qianqiu's back. Heavens! Only now did everyone realize that the nearly 100 cold lights were all flying swords. They had never seen anyone control so many flying swords at once. A gust of wind blew outside, causing the leaves on the trees in the courtyard to rustle. Everyone looked over and saw the bloody mist being blown away by the wind. The scattered pieces of cloth on the ground were blown away, and the walls were dyed with a layer of blood. A thought flashed through everyone's mind. Not a single corpse left. Yu Qianqiu stared at the blood stains on the wall and the pieces of cloth on the ground. He felt slightly regretful. The power of these 100 flying swords was far from what he had imagined. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any blood stains and pieces of cloth left behind. They should have all been turned into ashes. What happened just now, although it was said to be slow, it was actually only a matter of a few moments. The hall became completely silent. None of the disciples dared to make a sound. They were all intimidated by the power of the group of swords. Those who had the same thought turned pale and completely gave up. They knew that there was no way they could escape this kind of attack. Was this the power of a foundation establishment cultivator? Shi Xiaodian looked at the silent Yu Qianqiu and clenched his fists tightly. His face was flushed, and he was actually trembling with excitement. The goal that the two of them had been fighting for many years had been realized by Boss before him. Who dares to fight here? Do you want to die? A loud shout rang out, and then 7 figures appeared on the courtyard wall. 7 middle-aged men in plain robes with sharp eyes stood on the wall of the courtyard and observed the situation inside. Do you want to die? Yu Qianqiu was slightly annoyed. 7 cold rays of light shot out from his storage bag at lightning speed towards the 7 of them. Shi Xiaodian suddenly shouted, "Boss, help!" The 7 flying swords were pressed against the throats of those 7 people. If Shi Xiaodian had not shouted in time, there would have been a bloody hole in their necks. The faces of the 7 people on the wall immediately turned ashen, not daring to move. How could a person who could use a flying sword be ordinary? Yu Qianqiu coldly stared at Shi Xiaodian. The latter smiled bitterly and begged, "Boss, please let them go. They are not ordinary servants. They are the retainers of the general's estate. They have been loyal to my family for generations and are my father's most trusted subordinates. They have been protecting the safety of the estate and my family for a long time. They didn't mean to offend you, boss." Yu Qianqiu thought about it and felt that it made sense. They had probably rushed over after hearing that disciple scream. He looked back at the 7 people on the wall and saw that they were all standing there, giving off the airs of heroes. However, their faces were pale from fear. He nodded slightly and said, "Tell them not to tell anyone about what happened here." The 7 cold rays of light returned to his storage bag. "Don't worry, boss. They will know even if you don't tell them. Shi Xiaotian turned around and walked into the courtyard. He cupped his hands towards the 7 people on the wall and said, 7 uncles, please leave. There is nothing wrong here, don't worry. The 7 of them also knew the rules of the estate. No one was allowed to come here. If they hadn't heard the scream, they wouldn't have rushed over. The leader in the middle looked at the bloodstains at his feet. He looked at Yu Qianshou, who was sitting high up in the hall, and bowed to Shi Xiaotian. 3rd young master, be careful. We will leave first. The 7 of them returned to the courtyard. This was just a small episode. When Shi Xiaotian turned around and returned to the hall, he was instantly stunned. There was a big group of people just now, but now, only Yu Qianshou and Ling Feng were left. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianshou in shock. Just now, Yu Qianshou's figure flashed through the crowd, and everywhere he went, people disappeared into thin air. More than 10 people disappeared, just like that. They could see it clearly, but they were confused by it. Ling Feng pointed at the place where the people disappeared and said in shock, Marshal Uncle, they don't worry, they are fine. I just sent them to another place. Yu Qianshou smiled. These people were all Chun Feng's assistants. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Chan Feng to guarantee the logistics of the small army alone. After sending them to Utopia, his sister would naturally control their natal primordial spirits first. Marshal Uncle, the 3 of them clearly found it hard to accept this reality. All right, you don't have to call me Marshal Uncle anymore. Just call me boss like little Tian. Yu Qianshou waved his hand. Moreover, I have already reached the core formation stage. Calling me Marshal Uncle is a bit outdated. I should be calling you Grandmaster. But you're no longer disciples of Fuxian Island, so you can forget about calling me Grandmaster. Just call me boss. The 4 of them were stunned. He had already reached the core formation stage? Shi Xiaotian said in surprise. Boss, you have really reached the core formation stage. Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes at him and waved his hand. Let's not talk about this. While I am here, I can protect you. The 4 of you should hurry up and build your foundation. After that, I have something for you to do. The 4 of them nodded in surprise and sat down cross-legged in the hall. They consumed the pills and focused on refining them. Not long after, the painful process of building their foundation gradually appeared on the 4 of them. Yu Qianshou sat down at the side and looked at the 4 of them silently. He already had plans for the 4 of them. He needed them to run around and do some things for him outside. As long as they did not enter Utopia, there was no need to strip away their natal primordial spirits. Otherwise, it would be easy for people with high cultivation levels to see through them. As for Shi Xiaotian, he had entered Utopia once, but he had been trapped in an array and did not know anything. Among the 4 of them, Shi Xiaotian was the most talented. Yu Qianshou gave him another foundation establishment pill, and he succeeded in building his foundation with only 3. Although Ling Feng and Bei Zi had succeeded with 3 pills each, they had also used 3 pills on the supporting Immortal Island. Lu Xianping, on the other hand, had to use 5 pills to succeed. Shi Xiaotian did not say anything. After Ling Feng and Bei Zi succeeded, they tried their best to suppress their excitement. They knelt in front of Yu Qianshou and said some words of gratitude. Xianping, who succeeded in the end, kowtowed 3 times without saying a word. Then, Shi Xiaotian led the 3 of them to wash up and stood in front of Yu Qianshou in high spirits. Ling Feng and the other 2 looked at Yu Qianshou as if they were looking at their parents again. It was difficult for outsiders to understand their feelings of being pulled back from the brink of despair. However, this was what Yu Qianshou needed after years of planning. This is a storage bag for you. Yu Qianshou threw a bag to Shi Xiaotian. When Shi Xiaotian caught it, he was stunned at first. Then he burst into laughter and thanked him profusely. Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss. He had been drooling over this legendary item for a long time. What are you laughing at? Yu Qianshou's words immediately made him stand to the side, but he still kept touching the bag in his hand. Yu Qianshou tapped his finger on the tea table beside him and pointed at the 4 jade archives for large porcelain bottles and 4 swords on the table. The Jade disc contains supporting immortal islands, supporting immortal sword technique, and the bottle contains vitality pills. Each of you, take them and cultivate diligently. Don't be lazy. The four of them were pleasantly surprised. They had just built their foundation, and now, Yu Qianqiu had prepared everything they needed. Where else could they find such a good boss? The four of them took their things and thanked him profusely. Shi Xiaotian laughed so hard that he almost fainted. He hugged the pile of things, his mouth wide open. Happiness came too suddenly, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, he did not notice that Yu Qianqiu's expression gradually darkened when he saw Shi Xiaotian's behavior. Chapter 140. Ling Feng tugged at him, and Shi Xiaotian immediately reacted. He smiled awkwardly and placed the items in his hands into his storage pouch. Frivolous. Yu Qianqiu harumphed and looked at them for a while before saying, "There are some things I need you to do. Ling Feng, the three of you will stay here for now. Once your cultivation reaches a certain level, the three of you will split up and travel around the Huaxia Empire, cultivating while traveling. First, to broaden your horizons, and second, to gather some disciples with spiritual roots. Don't worry about what I do. In short, as long as they are not affiliated with any sect, regardless of their age, bring them all here. The more the better. I have a use for them. Remember, try to keep a low profile and don't let the other sects find out. All right, if you don't have any money in the secular world, you can ask little Tian for it. I believe the general's mansion is not short of money. This is what I want the three of you to do. Don't slack off." Shi Xiaotian's face twitched unnaturally. Ling Feng and the other two looked at each other. Traveling and cultivating at the same time, that was actually such a good thing. However, from Yu Qianqiu's expression, it seemed like this matter was very important. They immediately cupped their fists and said, "Boss, we understand." Yu Qianqiu nodded and took out 4 small silver balls. He passed them to the 4 and said, "These are hollow inside. I have placed something inside. If you encounter danger outside and can't save yourself, you can use your divine sense to check. When the time comes, someone will come to save you. Remember to keep it well." Something that could save lives was indeed a good thing. The 4 carefully kept it. Shi Xiaotian looked at the 3 of them. It seemed like they had all been assigned tasks, except for him. This was too much of a blow to his confidence. He couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what should I do?" "You?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and said coldly, "Go do what you need to do. Do your old profession." Shi Xiaotian was startled and said, "Boss, what old profession do I have?" "Yes, why not?" Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and said, "Your matter is very important. You should use your identity as the general's 3rd young master to befriend the nobles in the capital. Don't neglect eating, drinking, and playing." Ling Feng and the other 2 turned their heads to the side. Shi Xiaotian's face darkened, and he said stiffly, "Boss, you call this a very important matter?" "Yes, very important." Yu Qianqiu glared fiercely at him, his expression solemn as he said, "I want you to thoroughly investigate all the officials of the 5th rank and above in the Huaxia Empire, as well as their families. Then, record everything down for me." As he spoke, he handed several Jade archives to Miao Yi. Shi Xiaotian took the Jade archive and stood rooted to the ground. A thought flashed through his mind. Was Boss planning to rebel? Otherwise, why would a cultivator want this thing? Seeing his expression, Yu Qianqiu knew what he was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't think too much. It's not what you think. You'll know when the time comes. All right, I still have some matters to attend to. Just do as I say." Hearing his words, Shi Xiaotian felt relieved. He cupped his fists at Ling Feng and the other 2 and said, "Understood." Another night passed, and the sky outside was already beginning to brighten. Yu Qianqiu walked into the courtyard, and the long sword on his back was unsheathed with a chong sound. With his hands behind his back, he turned into a streak of light and flew away. The 4 who were sending him off were fascinated by the sight. Shi Xiaotian even cried out, "Boss, you're too awesome. This won't do. I must learn this as soon as possible." On a mountaintop on the outskirts of the capital, Yu Qianqiu stood silently, for a long while. His body was already drenched from the dew. At this moment, the rays of the rising sun were so blinding that he had to close his eyes. He stood there, waiting for the sun to rise. Everything was bathed in a layer of gold. He turned to look at the densely populated capital of Huaxia and mumbled, "So many beauties have fallen to the hands of countless heroes. Since the heavens sent me here, I'd be letting myself down if I don't do something." Shouty yawned. "If you were to sit on the throne one day, I wonder how you'd feel?" Facing the rising sun, he stretched lazily. Thinking about the place he was going to, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. Time really passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 10 years. He wondered how his father, who had helped him clean up the murder scene, was doing. And that crybaby mother. Yu Qianqiu grinned, and a hint of anticipation appeared on his face. He unsheathed his long sword and left with him. In a small forest outside Swallow City, Yu Qianqiu took a look at the surroundings. It seemed like this was the place where he had opened his eyes back then. He slowly walked out and walked toward the ancient city gate where people and carriages came and went. It was very familiar, and not much had changed. It was still the same. It was rare for him to come out, and now that he could use the kinesis flight technique, transportation was much more convenient. This time, he wanted to go home to take a look. Walking on the streets of Swallow City, there were all kinds of shops, and it was a bustling scene. Yu Qianqiu sighed with emotion as he relived this familiar scene. Suddenly, he realized that many people were looking at him with strange gazes. He thought to himself, "It's impossible that they know me. I left home at the age of 16, and it's been almost 10 years since then. My appearance has changed a lot." Thinking about it, he felt relieved. It was probably because he was carrying a sword on his back and carrying a bag on his waist that looked a little weird. If he had known earlier, he would have kept it first. He came to a stop in front of a rich and powerful mansion. The plaque on the door read, "Yu Manor" in gold. He had finally arrived home. Looking at the bright and clean appearance of the house, it was obvious that there were no signs of decline. It was easy to imagine that the family head here had taken good care of the whole house. Climbing up the steps, just as he was about to enter, he saw the servant guarding the door walk out and block him with hostility. He shouted, "Where did you come from, evil person?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He was actually blocked by a servant when he entered his own house. His gaze followed the servant's gaze and landed on the hilt of the sword on his back. F***CK. A person carrying a sword is an evil person? Isn't this servant's foresight a little too bad? What's wrong with father? Why did he choose such a person to guard the door? Damn it. You even dare to block the eldest young master's way. I'll fire you later. Just as he was about to lose his temper, he remembered that this was his own house. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile. I didn't think that after leaving home for almost 10 years, I wouldn't even be able to enter the house. Who are you? I remember that Uncle Fu used to be the gatekeeper. Hearing him say this, the servant was stunned as well. He looked him up and down, and only then did he realize that there was some resemblance between his brows and the old master's. Bewildered, he asked, "You're the eldest young master?" "I am." Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. He then asked, "Who are you? I haven't seen you before." I. Only now did the servant realize that he had provoked the eldest young master. He stuttered for a while before bowing and saying, "Uncle Fu is my father. This little one is Fu Qing." Saying this, he quickly opened the door and said, "Eldest young master, please come in." As soon as he finished speaking, Fu Qing ran into the mansion while shouting, "Eldest young master is back. Eldest young master is back." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Damn it, why did he have to be so ostentatious? Then he shook his head with a bitter smile and walked in. The result of Fu Qing's loud shout was that the richest mansion in Swallow City immediately boiled over. Yu Qianqiu walked through the porch and came to the courtyard. He saw a group of people coming out of the main hall. He could vaguely recognize some of them as relatives of his family. The man and woman standing at the front were none other than his father and mother. Yu Qianqiu was a little excited. He strode forward and knelt down in front of the two. He kowtowed 3 times and said, "Son Yu Qianqiu greets father and mother." Chapter 141. Two pairs of hands helped him up. It was his parents. The family of three looked at each other. Yu Changwei, whose sideburns already had some gray hair, held his arm and patted his shoulder, saying, "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Shui Enyang threw herself into his arms and started crying. She wailed, "It's all your father's fault. My son has been gone for so many years." Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and awkwardly looked at his father, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He then pushed Shui Enyang away and said, "Mother, don't cry. I'm back now." Yu Changwei's eyes were a little red. He pulled his wife away from his son and said, "What are you doing? Why are you crying as soon as your son is back? Aren't you purposely making your son worry?" Shui Enyang struggled free and pulled Yu Qianqiu. She cried, "Chou, it's good that you're back. You have to save your younger brother. You have to save your younger brother." The crying stopped abruptly. Shui Enyang was so sad that she fainted. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He quickly held his mother and carried her. He walked towards his parents' room with familiarity. The group of people followed behind him. When they reached his parents' room, he placed his mother on the bed. He grabbed his mother's hands and infused 2 streams of vital energy into his mother's body, quickly dispersing the pent-up air in her chest. Shui Enyang slowly woke up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she started crying again. She was already crying like this. If she cried anymore, she would hurt her spirit. Yu Qianqiu immediately placed a finger on his mother's forehead. Shui Enyang immediately fell asleep. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief and shouted, "Someone!" A young maidservant looked at the silent old master and trembled as she walked to Yu Qianqiu's side and said timidly, "Eldest young master." Yu Qianqiu took out an origin chi pill and handed it to her. "When Madam wakes up, dissolve this pill in a bowl of warm water and feed it to Madam. Don't forget." The maid quickly complied. Yu Changwei had been doing business for so many years. At this time, his attention had always been on his son. He saw that his son was nimble in ordering people around. His expression and behavior vaguely had the aura of a superior. He also had a few methods to treat his wife. Obviously, he had lived a good life outside. When he left, he was only 16 years old. Now his bearing was steady and his face resolute. The immaturity of the past had faded, and he was already an adult. "Is your mother okay?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little sad. I'll be fine after taking some medicine." Yu Qianqiu stood up and turned around. He stared at his father and frowned. "Father, did I hear wrongly? Mother seemed to have asked me to save my younger brother. What's going on?" He didn't know that in the second year after he left, after giving birth to her first child, Shui Enyang, who had been infertile for many years, actually gave birth to a younger brother. Yu Changwei sighed. His eldest son left, but God gave him a younger son. It could be said that it was God's will. But this matter of the clam-forming pearls was really a little difficult to talk about in front of his son. "Father, what's wrong? Is there something inconvenient to tell your son?" Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy. Yu Changwei shook his head and smiled bitterly. He slowly explained the cause of the matter. "In the second year after you left, your mother gave birth to a younger brother. His name is Yu Wuqiu. He is now 8 years old. But a few days ago, your younger brother suddenly disappeared. Yesterday, someone sent a letter saying that your younger brother had been kidnapped by them. They wanted us to prepare 10,000 taels of gold and come to collect it today." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head in acknowledgement. He indeed didn't expect to have a younger brother. But the two of them had been married for a long time. When he left, they weren't even 40 years old. It wasn't strange for them to have another child. But what was wrong with the Yu clan's descendants? The eldest was kidnapped once, and now the second was kidnapped again. Were the Yu clan's descendants so easy to kidnap? Who knew if there would be more thieves? It seems like the Yu clan's wealth is something that people are jealous of. Mother's maiden family has no one left. I wonder if our Yu clan's relatives, it's really hard to say. I believe father isn't a foolish person and should have some idea. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Just now, he seemed to have seen a large group of Yu clan's relatives. When they saw him, some of them had strange expressions. Yu Changwei said in a gloomy tone, "I already had my suspicions. Some people probably think that I only know how to do business and not kill people. I know you're not a good person. Otherwise, your business wouldn't be so big. Yu Qianshou smirked and asked, Did the kidnappers report their names? No. Yu Chang'e shook his head and said, They said that they will send someone to check on the ransom today and tell them the location of the transaction. When the time comes, they will hand over the kidnappers. As he spoke, he suddenly stared at his son and asked, Qianshou, you've been cultivating for so many years. Have you learned any immortal techniques? I didn't cultivate. That's what soul formation cultivators do. We're just cultivators. Yu Qianshou smiled. There was no need to tell such words to his father. Of course, he knew what his father was thinking, and it was none other than him trying to utilize some immortal techniques to rescue Qin Hao. He didn't answer directly and said, Father, don't worry. As long as my brother is fine, I guarantee that you won't have to pay a single cent and my brother will come back safely. Yu Changwei nodded happily. The father and son chatted as they walked out of the bedroom. When they came to the courtyard outside, there was a large group of clan members and servants standing there. Seeing the father and son come out, an old man in the middle who seemed to be the oldest asked, Changwei, how is second mother? Do you need to call a doctor? Yu Changwei bowed and said, Thank you for asking, clan leader. Second mother is just a little sad. She will be fine after a good sleep. Qianshou, come and greet clan leader. Yu Qianshou didn't have a good impression of this group of clan members. In his memory, his father lost his parents and was extremely poor. None of the clan members helped him. Later on, his father received help from his mother's family and relied on his own hard work to have such a large business today. As a result, this group of clan members flocked to him like ducks after hearing the news. They were really powerful. However, the Chinese had a strong sense of clan. Yu Qianshou didn't want his father to be embarrassed, so he walked over and bowed. Yu Qianshou greets clan leader. The clan leader nodded and said, I heard that you went out to learn martial arts in the past. I wonder what martial arts you learned. Have you returned after completing your martial arts? Look at the sword on your back. Did you learn some martial arts? Yu Qianshou knew that his parents didn't spread the news of his cultivation. He smiled indifferently and said, I didn't learn anything practical. I just went out for a walk. I happen to know that some cowardly scoundrels wanted to harm my family, so I specially bought this sword to deter them. The clan leader stroked his long beard and said, Very good. He didn't say anything else. However, a middle-aged man beside him walked to Yu Changgui's side and said darkly, Brother Changgui, I've seen eldest brother's son in the past. Why does he look nothing like him now? Your family is rich, so you have to be careful. What he meant was to tell Yu Changgui that his youngest son had just been kidnapped. His eldest son, whom he hadn't heard from for many years, was here. Furthermore, there was a difference in his appearance. Be careful that someone had designs on your family's wealth. Brother, don't worry. He's definitely my eldest son. Yu Changgui replied in a deep voice. In her heart, she was a little unhappy. How could her own son not know? Not to mention anything else, just based on the fact that her son could say, Mother's maiden family has no one left. I don't know our Yu family's ancestral relatives. These words were known to the heavens, the earth, you, and I, and only the person involved could understand the profound meaning behind it. It was clear that this was undoubtedly her eldest son. Moreover, as a father, how could he not know the minute details of his son's appearance? Father, who is this elder? Yu Qianshou looked at that person with interest and asked. Chapter 142. Qianshou, don't be rude. This is the patriarch's eldest son, Yu Zhongping. In terms of seniority, he is your uncle. Yu Changgui reprimanded. Oh, so it's uncle. Yu Qianshou bowed and said, Qianshou greets uncle. I hope uncle doesn't blame nephew for being rude. However, nephew deeply agrees with uncle's words. There must be someone coveting my family's wealth. Nephew firmly believes that there must be a mole in the Yu family, colluding with those villains outside. Otherwise, my younger brother wouldn't have been captured so easily with a few strong subordinates. Uncle, don't you think so? He seemed to be extremely respectful on the surface, yet anyone could discern the targeted intent in his tone. It was as if Yu Zhangping was the mole, and it caused the expressions of the surrounding people to become extremely strange. Yu Zhangping's face twitched as he sternly said, "What do you mean by that?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at his father and saw that he had actually turned his head to the side as if he didn't hear anything. This further confirmed his guess, and he couldn't help but laugh. "Ha, Uncle, don't misunderstand. It's nothing. I just want to tell everyone as the Yu family's eldest son that since I'm back, anyone who dares to stretch their claws into my family must be prepared to be beheaded. Even if it's the Heavenly Emperor. I won't let a single one of them go." At the end of his words, the chill in his voice was unmistakable. Yu Zhangping still wanted to say something, but was stopped by his father, the Yu family's patriarch. He only heard him say with a smile, "Eldest brother is right. If it's really a family thief, we can't let a single one of them go." Yu Qianqiu smiled and saluted him. "Patriarch is indeed worthy of being the patriarch, truly wise." Master. Fu Qing hurriedly walked over and said, "There are 3 people outside barging in. They say they are second young master's ticket holders." Hearing this, the members of the Yu clan immediately started whispering to each other. Everyone knew that the so-called owner of the ticket was naturally the kidnapper. To actually dare to barge into the Yu clan in broad daylight, his guts were truly too great. Yu Changgui's expression changed, and he hurriedly walked towards the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. His father was anxious to save his son and had lost his usual calmness. Thereupon the group of people followed him. In the main hall courtyard, 3 burly men saw a group of people coming, but they still stood there with their heads held high. Sure enough, they had the style of kidnappers who wanted money more than their lives. Yu Changgu calmed himself down, walked over, and cupped his fists. "I am Yu Cheng. May I know which mountain the 3 heroes are from?" A rough-looking man on the left cupped his fists and said, "Well said." Seeing that Lord Yu is a man who understands the rules, I won't waste any more time. As he spoke, he pointed at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and said, "This is our octagonal stronghold's second leader, Wang. Today, he's here to compete with Elder Yu's faction. Gong against gong, we'll be counting the tickets face to face." The so-called counting tickets was to let the victim confirm whether the kidnapper was his man or not. Then, the kidnapper would confirm whether the victim was sincere in redeeming the ticket. If there was no sincerity, then the hostage might be killed. Yu Qianqiu slightly narrowed his eyes. Octagonal stronghold again. This daddy almost forgot to settle the score with you guys. Today, you guys came to remind me. Very good. Second leader Wang. Yu Changgu cupped his fists. The second leader Wang in the middle did not say a word and only nodded to the man on the right. That man took out a jade pendant from his bosom and handed it to Yu Changgu. When the latter saw the jade pendant, his body swayed and he almost lost his footing. Obviously, it was his son's possession. The man on the left chuckled and said, "If Lord Yu has verified it, please bring us to see if the 10,000 taels of gold has been prepared." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and unhurriedly walked over and said, "A bunch of reckless fools. 10,000 taels of gold, and they still dare to ask for it." As he spoke, he supported his father and walked straight back and said, "Fu Qing, find a chair for master to sit down and rest." The Yu family's group of relatives were somewhat stunned, but since it was none of their business, no one said anything. In the crowd, Yu Zhangping's face flashed with a trace of a sneer. His condescending look immediately angered the 2 bandits. They immediately reached for the sabers on their waists, wanting to teach Yu Qianqiu a lesson. However, the second leader Wang quickly held them down. When he saw Yu Qianqiu carrying a long sword on his back and a bag on his waist, his pupils fiercely contracted. Fu Qing brought over a chair, as instructed. Yu Qianqiu helped his father sit down and said softly, "Father, don't worry for the time being. Leave this matter to me to handle." Yu Changgu grabbed his wrist. Yu Qianqiu lightly pushed him away and shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He turned back to stare at the 3 bandits and coldly said, 10,000 taels of gold. What can you do if I don't give it to you?" As soon as these words came out, The Yu family's relatives immediately whispered to each other. Wasn't this forcing the kidnappers to kill the hostages? The two bandits who were about to pull out their sabers immediately pulled out their sabers again. Second Leader Wang once again held them down and took a deep breath. He didn't dare to be sure before, but now that he heard the other party say such words, he was almost convinced. Second Leader Wang took a few steps forward and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. He said in a respectful tone, "Senior is an expert in the cultivation world. It was our fault for offending Senior today. We also don't dare to ask Senior for the 10,000 taels of gold. We will definitely return the people we kidnapped safely. We won't dare to be careless. Please let us go, Senior." The two bandits were immediately stunned. The usually arrogant second leader would actually say such humble words. They wouldn't believe it, even if they were beaten to death. The Yu family's relatives were also dumbfounded. How did the kidnappers suddenly apologize? Among the crowd, Yu Chongping had an angry expression. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "I didn't expect you to be so perceptive. You actually know about the cultivation world. I can let you go, but you have to answer a question first. If I am satisfied with your answer, I will let you go. Otherwise, if you make me unhappy, I will definitely raze your Octagon village to the ground." Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The Octagon village was a place that even the government couldn't raze to the ground. Yu Qianqiu's words were too arrogant. However, what do they mean by the cultivation world? Everyone was confused. Yu Chongwei, who was sitting on a chair, once again sized up his son's proud back. "Senior, please ask." Second Leader Wang bowed respectfully. "Tell me who the Yu family is colluding with. Don't tell me you didn't, or the consequences will be very serious." Yu Qianqiu said lightly. Yu Chongping, who was in the crowd, trembled. He looked at his father, the clan leader. This Second Leader Wang had a difficult expression on his face. The rough-looking subordinate behind him walked out, cupped his fists, and said casually, "Young Senior, you don't have to make things difficult for our second leader. We can't talk about this. We have our own rules. If we tell you who the client is, then how will our Octagon village be able to maintain its reputation in the future? How will we be able to continue living in the underworld?" Before he could finish his words, they heard the sound of a sword ring. Everyone saw a flash of light in front of them, and then the bandit lost his voice on the spot. His head was tossed high into the air, separated from his shoulders. Warm blood spurted from the severed head, and when the blood ran dry, his body swayed and fell to the ground. That light transformed into a flying sword and circled around Yu Qianqiu a few times before returning to its scabbard. "Murder!" Everyone cried out in shock. Yu Qianqiu turned around and glanced at them. He said coldly, "If you want to die, then scream as loud as you can." Just this sentence alone caused everyone to fall silent. They had just witnessed the flying sword kill someone. Who would dare to go against his words? A certain father and son were shivering in fear. "Brother!" The remaining two bandits cried out in grief. One of them hugged the dead body, while Second Leader Wang hugged his head. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and shouted angrily, "There are rules in the cultivation world. We are not allowed to meddle in worldly affairs. Why did you kill us mortals?" Yu Qianqiu sneered, "Humph. You seem to know quite a lot. How strange. You kidnapped my younger brother, and now you're trying to reason with me? What kind of logic is that? Forget it. I won't be able to get anything out of you. I believe you have a first leader, right? I'd better go to the Octagon village myself." As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold glints shot out from the storage pouch. Two mournful screams rang out, then stopped abruptly. The cold glints disappeared into the red, and the thick smell of blood spread out along with a bloody mist. The Yu clan's relatives and servants had never seen murder like this. Those who were braver had only seen beheadings at the entrance of the food market. They couldn't bear to watch any longer and turned their heads away to retch. Chapter 143. The cold light receded and the blood mist gradually dissipated. The three bandits had turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, everyone shuddered. This was clearly a murderous demon. The thick smell of blood left a deep mark in everyone's heart. Fu Qing, Yu Qianqiu called out. The person who was called let out an ah and moved over with trembling legs. His chin trembled as he said, eldest young master. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and frowned. He shouted, what are you afraid of? How can you guard the door of my Yu clan with this kind of behavior? Stand properly. Yes, eldest young master. Fu Qing tried his best to suppress his trembling body. Arrange for people to surround this place. Without my permission, none of the Yu clan's relatives are allowed to leave. As he spoke, a sword appeared in Yu Qianqiu's hand, and he handed it to him. He said, hold this well. If anyone dares to barge in, kill them with this sword. Seeing him holding the sword in a daze, Yu Qianqiu shouted again, if anyone dares to barge in, kill them without mercy. If you dare to let even one person go, I will take your head. Do you understand? Understood. Fu Qing hurriedly nodded his head. All the relatives looked at each other in dismay, but no one dared to object. The patriarch and his sons' faces were ashen. Yu Qianqiu faced his father and bowed. He said, Father, please wait a moment. I will go to the Octagon village to bring my brother back. It won't be long before the truth is revealed. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, go. Come back quickly. Don't let the relatives wait too long. Yes, father. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully. The long sword behind him shot out with a chong sound and carried him away like a ray of light. Instantly, everyone in the courtyard was dumbfounded. That leisurely flying celestial being was fortunately seen by a group of ordinary people. Someone immediately exclaimed, heavens! Big Brother is a sword immortal. Sword immortal. All the relatives whispered to each other. Yu Qianqiu was so excited that he was trembling slightly. He had told his son to go and come back quickly, but he didn't expect that he would use such a shocking method. Did he say something wrong? Sigh. Why did he say go and return quickly? One must know that a sword immortal would never show his true appearance in front of mortals. AI, my son is no longer an ordinary person. I was too abrupt. Fu Qing looked at the sword in his hand with a face full of surprise. Today, he was fortunate enough to be bestowed a sword by a sword immortal. This was a blessing that he had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. He held the sword with both hands and walked over to Yu Qianqiu. He asked respectfully, Master, what should this lowly one do? Yu Qianqiu stared at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but reach out to take it. He turned it over and over in his hand and examined it, causing the other clan members to look at it with envy. Yu Qianqiu stood up from his chair and pulled out the sword. The sword was blue like autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade glowed with envy. Yu Qianqiu stood up from his chair and pulled out his sword with a schwa sound. The blade of the sword was as clear as autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp edge of the sword was glowing. Good sword. It's really a good sword. All the relatives kept praising it. In fact, they couldn't tell if it was a good sword or not. They mainly thought that it was something from Sword Immortal. How could it be bad? In addition, the sword looked so beautiful, so they naturally concluded that it was a good sword. This sword was personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, and there were many more in Utopia. As he could only control 100 flying swords, these were all in stock. However, compared to the treasured swords of the mortal world, this flying sword of the Dharma artifact level was incomparable in terms of workmanship and material. Yu Qianqiu put the sword back into its scabbard and handed it to Fu Qing. This isn't an ordinary sword. It's the eldest young master's flying sword. Since the eldest young master has already given you the authority, just do as he says. You can mobilize all the servants in the residence. Go. The moment he said this, all the servants looked at Fu Qing with envy. Some of the unmarried maids looked at Fu Qing with splendor in their eyes. Yes, Fu Qing retreated. He never thought that a servant guarding the door would have such great authority. This thing was not inferior to an imperial sword. Thinking of the eldest young master's words, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly mobilized people and surrounded all the relatives. Yu Qianqiu still had some impression of the Octagon village's location. After leaving the Yu residence, It only took him a few moments to find the Octagon Village's hideout in a mountainous area that was 100 miles away. He landed on the sword and immediately caused a commotion in the hideout. Yu Qianqiu sized up the village. It was built on the basis of danger. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It was no wonder that even the authorities couldn't take it down. He squinted his eyes and stared at the signboard at the main entrance of the stronghold. On it were the words Ji Hall. He snorted in his heart. It seemed like robbers liked to use this gimmick. At this moment, a group of people came out of the hall. All of them were holding shining swords and spears. Needless to say, the burly man in the middle was the leader of the bandit hideout. The man was stunned when he saw Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned when he saw him. The burly man was wearing the same clothes as him. It was the standard clothes of the supporting Immortal Island. After a closer look, he was astonishingly at the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. The man excitedly strode over and kowtowed. He said, "Luli greets Senior. Senior has come here, but the sect wants..." He was so excited that he couldn't continue speaking. The group of bandits behind him were also dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. He immediately understood everything. So this guy was also an unlucky person who was chased out of the supporting Immortal Island. No wonder the second leader knew a little about the cultivation world. Looking at this guy's expression, he probably thought that the supporting Immortal Island wanted to call him back. Wishful thinking. I was wondering who was causing trouble here. So it was the abandoned disciple of the supporting Immortal Island. You actually dared to wear the clothes of the supporting Immortal Island. You really don't want to live? Yu Qianqiu snorted. The man kowtowed again. Senior, please forgive me. After I left the supporting Immortal Island, I really didn't know how to survive. I could only bring a group of people to become bandits. Yu Qianqiu thought about it. A disciple who wasn't even at the foundation establishment stage couldn't even be compared to a martial arts expert. Moreover, most of them had lost contact with the outside world since they were young. They knew nothing about survival. Ling Feng and the others were also at a loss when they were just chased out. Like Guan Yu, he ended up pretending to be a Taoist in a Taoist temple to swindle people. Thinking about this, his anger dissipated a lot. He said in a deep voice, "You are Luli, right? Get up. I'm not here to catch up with you. Where's the kidnapped kid in the U residence?" Luli quickly got up and pointed to the horse pen. "That kid is locked up there. You didn't do anything to him, right?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly. No, not even a strand of hair is missing." Luli wasn't an idiot. He could tell that this kid was related to the people from the supporting Immortal Island. In his heart, he cursed the employer's ancestors, but he didn't know that he was also cursing Yu Qianqiu's ancestors. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked into the horse pen. Instantly, a rage burned in his chest. A kid whose face could be vaguely seen was about 8 or 9 years old. He was glaring at the people who came in. His body was covered with grass and horse dung. He was tied up tightly, and his mouth was stuffed with a dirty cloth. His cheeks were swollen, and there was a clear palm print. It was obvious that he had been slapped. This was his younger brother, Yu Wuqiu. This is what you meant by not even a strand of hair is missing. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Luli with a cold smile. He originally wanted to take him in for his own use. But now, he was sentenced to death on the spot. The latter was so scared that his head was full of sweat. He stuttered and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu walked to the kid's side and pulled out the rag in his mouth. A trail of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Who knew that the kid would spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva the moment he loosened his mouth? He opened his mouth and cursed. "Evil thieves, kill me if you have the guts. Otherwise, I will trample your den to the ground in the future." Yu Qianqiu, who was spat on his face, was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly and wiped his face. This brat spoke without rhyme or reason. He didn't know how to beat around the bush. If he was really a bandit, seeing him like this, I'm afraid he would really eliminate the root of the problem to prevent future troubles. He immediately flicked his finger on the kid's forehead and scolded jokingly. "Brat, what are you spitting for? I'm Yu Qianqiu." "Bastard, how dare you flick my forehead? You're Yu Qianqiu, right? Okay, I'll remember you." You're Yu Qianqiu?" Why is your name the same as my big brother's? The kid's tattered face was crooked. Nonsense. I'm your big brother. Father sent me to save you, Yuchincho said unhappily. Chapter 144. There's no proof. The kid showed a suspicious expression. What proof do you have to prove that you are my brother? Bastard, you're so smart. If you were smart, how could you be tied up here? Yuchincho flicked him again, causing him to cry out in pain. He casually broke the ropes binding him, got up, stared at Luli, and asked, "This was caused by Yu Zhongping's family and you, right? How did you know? Could it be that the second-in-command who went down the mountain told you?" Luli was shocked. Only he and the second head knew about this. He didn't tell anyone else. It was the second head who told him. It wasn't a good thing to betray one's employer. Yuchincho sneered. With Yu Zhongping's character, he shows everything on his face. Do you need someone to tell you? As for your second head, I saw that he wasn't feeling well, so I sent him to reincarnate. It's him. Suddenly, the kid pointed at his swollen face and said, "It was Yu Zhongping, that bastard. He tricked us out of the city. My face is swollen because of him." "Ah, you killed the second head. Then there are two other brothers?" Luli was shocked. Yuchincho glanced at the child and didn't say anything. He turned back to size up Luli and asked curiously, "I say, Luli, have you been away from supporting Immortal Island for too long? Or have water entered your brain? Do I need to report to you when I kill people? Stop talking nonsense with me. If it wasn't for the fact that we were from the same sect, your head would have been removed. Go and gather all your minions. I have something to say." Luli seemed to be drained of all his strength. He said dejectedly, "Yes," and walked out slowly. Maybe because he was tied up for too long, Yuwucho's limbs were a little stiff. Yuchincho looked at him and smiled. "Can you still walk? Do you want me to carry you?" Yuwucho was embarrassed into anger. "Who wants you to carry me? I can walk by myself." He suddenly asked curiously, "Are you really my brother?" He kept looking at the stranger in front of him. "Follow me if you can." Yuchincho couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He thought to himself, "You're just a little kid, yet you're already so arrogant. This is the problem of spoiling the children of big families. If this goes on, you'll be at a disadvantage. Today, I'll teach this cheap little brother a lesson, lest he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Dang, dang, dang. The urgent sound of a gong rang outside, and the entire stronghold became lively. Luli stood on a small wooden platform and looked at the hundreds of subordinates that had gathered. His face was ashen, and he did not make a sound, as if he had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, Yuchincho's strength was not something he could fight against. To put it bluntly, killing him was as easy as killing an ant. A group of subordinates stood in an orderly manner below the platform. Yuchincho snorted coldly in his heart. They were quite disciplined. He looked back at the little kid who was limping behind him and said, "Follow me." Luli took the lead and walked to the side of the wooden platform. The little kid struggled to climb up, but before he could stand firm, Yuchincho grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. "Let go of me, I can walk." The little kid's struggle was futile. Yuchincho pointed at the group of people below and said, "Originally, I wanted to let them go today, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today." As soon as he finished speaking, Luli knelt down and begged, "Senior, please let them go. They have parents and children at the foot of the mountain. Their families depend on them to earn money. If they weren't forced to, they wouldn't have followed me up the mountain to become bandits. Once they're killed, their families won't be able to survive. Senior, please have mercy." The subordinates all looked terrified. They had all seen Yuchincho descend from the sky. To them, those who could fly in the sky were like gods. Now that this god said he wanted to kill them, they immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. In an instant, the entire mountain camp was filled with begging voices. "What do you mean by taking care of the elderly and children? After you die, tell those words to the people you killed. Since you've come out to make a living, you must understand that sooner or later, you'll have to pay for what you did. It's not that I won't pay, it's that the time isn't right." Yuchincho slowly said in a cold voice, "No, Senior, I beg you no." Luli hugged his leg and begged. Scram! Yu Qianqiu directly kicked him off the platform. Then he shook the little kid and shouted, "Watch carefully." In fact, Yu Wuqiu was already a little stunned. He had never seen so many people kneeling and begging. As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold lights shot out from the storage bag, crazily sweeping towards the people kneeling on the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and screams shook the sky. The little kid was stunned at first. When he came to his senses, his whole body trembled. He covered his eyes with his little hands, unable to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. Today, he was going to kill this person for you to see. You have no choice but to watch. His thumb and index finger pinched the back of the little kid's neck, and a stream of true essence entered his body. The little kid's hands immediately drooped down, and his eyes were wide open. Witnessing the bloody, violent, and wanton killing in front of him, he could not speak, nor could he close his eyes. He could not move, and could only watch and listen. Crystal-clear tears continuously flowed down his cheeks. Below the platform, Luli clenched his fists and knelt there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up to the sky and howled. But none of those wantonly killing flying swords touched him. Those who wanted to escape were immediately shredded into pieces by a few cold lights. There were also those who wanted to fight it out with Yu Qianqiu before they died. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to get close. Their legs were nowhere to be seen, and when they fell, they were already shredded into pieces. In just a short while, apart from Luli, not a single living person could be seen below. Broken limbs were everywhere, and the blood on the ground gathered into streams that flowed towards the lower ground. The smell of blood in the air was suffocating. After killing those who needed to be killed, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense moved, and 100 cold lights swept towards the various buildings in the village with an unstoppable momentum. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. Not long after, smoke and dust rose everywhere. Even the erected flagpole was not spared. The cold lights retracted, and the sounds disappeared. The surroundings finally quieted down, and only Lu Li's sobbing could be heard below the platform. The entire Octagon village was no longer recognizable. Only the wooden platform under Yu Qianqiu's feet remained the same, standing there alone. Yu Qianqiu turned the little lad's head around and let him look around. He said, "Didn't you want to flatten this place? I've already done it for you, but what's wrong with you? Why don't you even dare to look? If you don't even dare to look, what gives you the right to say that you want to flatten this place?" Yu Qianqiu lifted him up and faced him, shouting, "Crying? Why are you crying? You only have this little guts and this little bit of guts. Are you even worthy of saying such things?" As he spoke, he turned him around again, letting him witness the tragic scene around him. He spun around and shouted, "Do you see that? Originally, I did not intend to kill them, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. All right, it's flattened now. Why are you crying? Are you regretting it? Then why did you open your mouth and speak such nonsense? Let me tell you now, as a man, you must be responsible for every word you say. Everything in front of you is the result of your careless words. Look carefully at everything here." After a while, when he was almost done lecturing Lu Li, Yu Qianqiu bent over and picked up Lu Li. Then, he carried the two of them and flew away on his sword. Just as he stood up, the wooden platform collapsed. The entire Octagon village was completely flattened. Chapter 145. Inside the Yu clan's courtyard, Yu Qianqiu descended from the sky with two people in his hands, his long sword returning to its scabbard. Everyone was shocked when they saw Yu Wuqiu's appearance. They didn't expect the Yu clan's young master, who usually lived a luxurious life, to end up like this, especially with the two palm prints on his face. When the patriarch and his son saw the people brought by Yu Qianqiu, their faces turned deathly pale. Yu Changguwei waved his hand to disperse the crowd, then hurriedly walked up to his son, who had a lifeless expression on his face, and asked anxiously, "Wuqiu, what happened to you?" "Father, he's fine. He was just a little frightened," Yu Qianqiu said calmly. At this moment, Yu Wucho was awoken by his father's familiar face. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Yu Qianshou was like he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly hid behind Yu Changwei, hugged his arm, and pointed at Yu Qianshou, screaming, "Father, he killed people. He really killed people. He killed so many people. So many people died." Everyone looked at Yu Qianshou at the same time, but they clearly weren't surprised that he had killed people. Yu Changwei looked at his eldest son, puzzled, and asked what happened. "It's nothing. It's just a few hundred small fries from the Octagon camp. I casually took care of them. In the future, there won't be any more Octagon camp bandits in this area," Yu Qianshou said with a calm smile. He said it lightly, but everyone's hair stood on end. A few hundred people were all killed by him in less than 4 hours. The more they thought about it, the colder they felt. When did the Yu clan have such a killer? You killed them all? Yu Changwei frowned. Obviously, he was a little unhappy with his son's massacre. "I didn't kill them all. I left one alive." Yu Qianshou shook his head and pointed at the man lying on the ground. He sneered and said, "This is the Octagon Stronghold's big leader, Lu Li. He has a close relationship with our patriarch and his son. I've already asked him, and he's already explained everything. This time, the kidnapping of my younger brother was the doing of the sanctimonious patriarch of our Yu clan, father and son. Their goal was to steal our clan's wealth. They were going to kill the hostages as soon as they got the gold, and then think of a way to get rid of my father so that there would be no successor for our family, and then find a reason to swallow our property." The 2 handprints on his younger brother's face were personally slapped by Yu Zhangping after he tricked him out of the city. It's just that they never expected me to come back at this time. The Yu clan's relatives immediately went into an uproar. They instantly distanced themselves from the father and son. It would be best if they didn't get hurt by this killer. Yu Qianshou sneered in his heart. Just by looking at the father and son's expression, he knew that this wasn't something that his son could do alone. "This daddy doesn't have time to be long-winded with you. I'll first make up a crime for you. In any case, it's just that. If I didn't care about this old man's face, I would have killed you long ago." Yu Changwei's complexion turned ashen. He fiercely turned his head and glared at the father and son. He shouted, "Unsatisfied beasts, what else do you 2 dogs have to say?" When the patriarch and his son saw Yu Qianshou bring Lu Li and Yu Wucho here, they knew that everything was over. They originally wanted to quibble, but when they saw the gloomy expression in Yu Qianshou's eyes, they couldn't say anything. In the face of such a powerful opponent, any kind of explanation was unnecessary. Suddenly, Yu Changping rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Yu Changwei's feet. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Big brother, I was blinded by greed. Big brother, for the sake of being from the same clan, please spare me this time." As he spoke, he slapped his own mouth. Yu Changwei kicked him away and sternly shouted, "Bastard, I don't have a brother like you. Come, tie up this father and son pair and send them to the government office together with this bandit." Several able-bodied men immediately took ropes and tied up the 3 men tightly, and then they were pushed out of the room. The Yu clan's relatives shook their heads and sighed. They didn't expect this sanctimonious father and son pair to have such wild ambitions. How many people didn't covet this family's wealth? "Wait," Yu Changwei suddenly sighed and said, "Forget it. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Just send them to the ancestral hall and deal with them according to the clan's rules." Then he cupped his hands towards the other clan members and said, "I hope that when we carry out the clan's rules, the clan members can be witnesses. That's right. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Of course. Don't worry, big brother. We all saw it with our own eyes, so we must be witnesses." Everyone agreed. Yu Changwei was the clan's biggest financial backer. If they didn't do him a favor, then when would they do him a favor? In any case, they wouldn't lose anything. At this time, Yu Qianshou suddenly stood up with a smile and bowed to everyone, saying, "Junior also has a matter to ask of all the uncles and brothers. Junior came back this time because of my father's summons. Since this matter is over, Junior still needs to go out and cultivate. As for this matter, I hope that all the uncles and brothers can keep it a secret for Junior. Just pretend that Junior never appeared in this matter, please." As soon as he finished speaking, Everyone immediately agreed, but the atmosphere from before was gone. Although they were all clan members, the crux of the matter was that this fellow was too ruthless. Killing people was like cutting vegetables, and he didn't even blink. He knew what the consequences would be if they said the wrong thing. But from his words, everyone thought of one thing. It turned out that there was such a powerful son hiding behind Yu Changgue, and he could summon him at any time, but he had never said anything about it. How sinister. Fortunately, they hadn't offended him too much. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a massacre. Who could resist that? Everyone shuddered at the thought of it. Yu Qianqiu smiled and thanked them. This was the effect he wanted. It wasn't easy for him to come back, so he had no choice but to use such a ruthless method. Since they had met, he had to get rid of them completely. In the future, he wouldn't place his thoughts here. A group of clan members and servants escorted the three people out of the Yu residence. The surroundings instantly became much quieter. Yu Wuqiu hid behind his father, craning his neck to secretly size up this elder brother of his. This elder brother was really a little too scary. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him. He had thought that Yu Wuqiu had been frightened, and he had to adjust his emotions a little to prevent it from leaving a shadow in his heart. Now, it seemed that this brat was born with courage, and there was no need to worry. What you said just now was all true. Yu Changgue looked at him and frowned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he asked in surprise, "What was true? You said that you still had to go out to cultivate. Didn't you come back with success this time?" Yu Changgue asked. Yu Wuqiu, who was behind him, suddenly shook him and asked, "Father, is he really my elder brother, Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Changgue lowered his head and shouted, "Bastard! If he isn't your elder brother, who else could he be?" Yu Wuqiu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said embarrassedly, "But he killed a lot of people. Father, he really killed a lot of people. Hundreds of people were all killed by him." "Ignorant!" Yu Changgue shouted. "If your elder brother didn't want to save you, would he have killed so many people?" When he remembered that the Octagon village had kidnapped both of his sons, he felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He thought that it was good to kill them. If they didn't kill them, who knew when they would kidnap his grandson again? Yu Qianqiu smiled and suddenly reached out to Fu Qing, who was standing not far away. The sword that Fu Qing was holding flew into his hand, causing the latter to panic. Yu Qianqiu handed the sword to his brother and said with a smile, "Take it." Chapter 146. When Yu Wuqiu saw that the sword could fly by itself, his eyes were already full of stars. When he saw his big brother telling him to hold it, he greedily looked at it and looked up at his father. Seeing his father nod his head, he shyly reached out to take it and held it tightly in his arms. He looked at his big brother and finally had a good impression of him. He still had the mind of a child. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Wuqiu, can you write now?" Yu Wuqiu nodded his head and said, "I could write when I was 4. Not bad." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and shouted to fucking, "Bring a short table over and prepare a brush, ink, and paper." Fucking hurriedly went to prepare. Yu Changgue looked at his two sons and didn't know what they were going to do. After a while, all the tools were set up. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the table and smiled at his brother. "Wuqiu, big brother has something to say to you. I will speak and you write. Write down everything I say. I want to test if you can really write." Hearing him say this, Yu Wuqiu's childish eagerness to win was aroused. He walked over and put the sword on the table. He grabbed a writing brush and dipped it in the ink. He stared at his brother with big eyes, waiting for him to speak. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and walked over to his side and said with a smile, "I am the eldest son of the family. I should be filial to my parents and share my father's worries. But I am young and frivolous. I want to pursue the great way, but the great way is vague. This road is full of ups and downs, but I must pursue it. I dare not be distracted, and I am ashamed to face my parents. Today, I will take up the brush and entrust a heavy task to me." At this point, Yu Wuqiu knew what he meant and looked back at his big brother in shock. Yu Changgue's eyebrows knitted together. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips and signaled his brother to continue writing. He sighed and said, "From today onwards, Big Brother's heavy responsibility will be entrusted to me. Brother must remember that when we were in the bandits' lair, Big Brother used the blood of hundreds of bandits to teach you. You must know that only by enduring the hardships of hardships can one rise above others. One must not indulge in riches and honor. One must guard against arrogance and rashness. One must be filial to one's parents. One must inherit the family business, and one must carry forward the family's name. Brother, I hope you will remember this great trust. After he finished speaking, he also finished writing. Although his handwriting wasn't very good, the meaning of the words was simple and clear. Yu Wucho was still a little confused about the great Tao in front of him. He only knew that his brother was going out to do something big, and everything in the family was going to be entrusted to him. Looking at the words on the paper, he pouted for a long time before reluctantly saying, "I will remember Big Brother's words." It's good that you've remembered it. Keep what you've written well. If I come back one day and find that you've failed to do it, you're still acting like a thief in a den of thieves. You don't have any real ability, but you're still spouting nonsense. Just wait and see how I'll deal with you then. Yu Chincho laughed. Yu Wucho pouted higher and higher. Yu Changue, on the other hand, was distressed. Originally, when he saw that his eldest son had returned, he thought that someone was going to inherit the family business. The tradition of the Huaxia Empire was that the eldest son would inherit the family business. Now that the eldest son had borrowed his second son's pen to express his intentions clearly, it was equivalent to indirectly answering the previous question. The path that he had walked on must be incomparably difficult, and he was afraid that it would be difficult to turn back. That's why he did this. He had put in a lot of effort. Yu Changue couldn't say anything more. Now that his son's real situation was in front of him, he was no longer an ordinary person and couldn't force him to stay. He could only regret why he agreed to his son's request back then. He sighed and said, "Fu Qing, put up the second young master's calligraphy and hang it in his room." Yes, Fu Qing respectfully accepted the order. Speaking of which, Fu Qing was really happy today. Master and young master would always look for him whenever something happened. His future was probably going to change. "When are we leaving?" Yu Changue sighed. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He originally wanted to leave right away, but thinking that it was too much. He hadn't returned for almost 10 years. What's the matter if he delayed for a day? He smiled and replied, "Then let's stay one more night." Yu Changue understood the meaning behind his words. He waved his hand and called for the servants to prepare a banquet. The father and son trio walked towards Shui and Yang. Yu Wucho hugged the sword happily. Just as he reached the door, he saw Shui and Yang coming out. When the latter saw her youngest son, she immediately hugged him and burst into tears. Yu Qianqiu had a toothache when he heard this. They hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years, but his mother still loved to cry. Both he and his father turned their heads to the side. How did my son become like this? Who slapped him on his face? Shui and Yang asked anxiously. Yu Changue's face twitched. He turned his head and said, "I say, are you done yet? Such a small injury will be fine in 2 days. Can't you see boss is here? Why are you crying all the time?" Shui and Yang stood up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she threw herself at him and cried, "Where did my son go for so many years? Don't tell me you don't even want your mother anymore." Woo-woo. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and pushed her away. He smiled bitterly. "Mother, your son hasn't eaten for a long time. My stomach is really hungry." Then why didn't you say so earlier?" Shui Ernyang wiped away her tears and said, "You wait. I will personally get it for you." She then led the servant girl away. Phew! The father and son let out a breath and looked at each other. Xiao Wucho shook his head and sighed. "I really can't stand mother like this. I would rather stay in the thieves' den for a few more days." "Bastard, what did you say?" Yu Changgue shouted. The little fellow stuck out his tongue and quickly changed the topic. "Big brother, I am too dirty. I will go take a bath first. Otherwise, I won't be able to attend the banquet later." He then ran away. Soon, the family of 4 sat at the sumptuous dinner table. With his mother's persuasion, Yu Qianqiu ate until he was full. Although it was a little uncomfortable, he enjoyed the warm feeling. That night, in Yu Changgui's study room, the father and son had a deep conversation. Yu Qianshou gave them 3 sealed porcelain bottles as an explanation. After that, Yu Qianshou asked someone to invite his mother over. In front of the 2 elders, he took out 2 ruby elixirs that were shining with rainbow light and handed them to them. The couple looked at the beads in their hands with their mouths agape. After a long time, Yu Changgui was moved and said, "Is this an immortal elixir?" Yu Qianshou smiled indifferently and said, "More or less. Father, mother, just take it. This elixir has the effect of preserving one's appearance for a long time. It can also detoxify and nourish one's appearance. After taking it, one will be immune to all kinds of poison. However, there are some side effects after taking it. You have to be prepared beside the toilet bowl and bathtub." Hearing the benefits, the couple directly filtered out the side effects. Yu Changgui solemnly swallowed the rainbow light into his mouth. However, he was not used to this quail egg-sized thing, so it took a lot of effort to swallow it down his throat. Shui Enyang was about to swallow it, but she stopped and said, "I think I don't need it. Leave it for your brother. Have you used it before, my son?" Yu Qianshou sighed in his heart. All mothers in the world were great. He smiled and said, "My brother is still young. Do you want him to stay like this for the rest of his life? I will take care of his matters. Mother, you don't have to worry too much. As for the elixir, I have already used it. You could take it with ease." Only then did Shui Enyang feel at ease and swallow it. After coming out, he did not sleep in his original room that night. Instead, he slept with his brother. He told the boy many things, but he did not know if he could remember them. The next morning, the family could no longer find him. Only then did they realize that Yu Qianshou had left quietly. Yu Changgui stood in the garden with his son, who was holding his sword. The former let out a long sigh. Chapter 147. Yu Qianshou originally wanted to spend the night peacefully before leaving. After lying in bed with his brother and chatting for a while, the little fellow fell asleep in a daze, perhaps because he was too tired. Looking at the sleeping little fellow, Yu Qianshou felt emotional. He considered if he should help the little fellow to a position that ordinary people couldn't reach. After some thought, he gave up. This family didn't have many people to begin with, and he was leaving. Furthermore, no one knew what the future held for them. Sometimes, there were some things that he wasn't confident in. If he wasn't careful, he might bring disaster to the family. It was best to let the family live peacefully. He tried his best not to let them get involved in those illusory matters. He could do whatever he wanted alone. Having a family to feed them would only be a burden to both of them. It was too dangerous. Unable to sleep late at night, Yu Qianshou decided to leave when he thought of how his mother would definitely be crying when they parted the next day. Although he said that he was leaving, he had actually returned to Utopia in an instant. Now, any place was extremely close to him, but it was also extremely far away. It was also late at night in Utopia. However, Ethereal Palace on Ethereal Peak was like a starry sky. It was extremely charming under the embellishment of fluorite. The messy names of Ethereal Peak and Ethereal Palace were all given by Yu Qianshou. The main reason was that he couldn't think of any good names, so he used them as if he had heard them somewhere before. As soon as Yu Qianshou appeared in Misty Palace, he heard a familiar horn sound from afar. He turned his head to look and murmured, "Emergency assembly signal. Is Yinchang training for night raids again? Let's take a look." There was a field in the middle of a row of wooden and stone houses that took up an area of nearly 1,000 meters. At that moment, the field was surrounded by flames. A group of people rushed out of the houses and lined up neatly in 3 groups. Yu Qianshou quietly appeared on top of a building to observe. The people in front of him were the original 400 disciples from the various sections. After eliminating the female disciples, there were 309 people left. Thus, under Yu Qianshou's suggestion, Guan Yu divided them into 3 companies. Each company had 103 people, with a company commander. Each company was further divided into 3 platoons, each platoon consisting of 34 people. Each platoon had a platoon leader. Each platoon was divided into 3 classes, and each class had 11 people. Each class had a squad leader. The 3 company commanders were 3 late nascent soul cultivators, and the platoon leaders and squad leaders were also nascent soul cultivators. At the same cultivation level, these positions were usually taken by cultivators who were good at commanding. Guan Yu immediately discovered that the efficiency of training had greatly increased after the division management. In front of the field, a large black, triangular flag was hung on a flagpole. If one were to look at it carefully under the light of the flames, they could vaguely see 2 large golden characters embroidered on it. Hero. Next to the flagpole, on a stone platform, Guan Yu was dressed in black, with a black scarf wrapped around his head. He swept his cold gaze across the field with an extraordinary bearing, nodding his head in satisfaction. Suddenly, he shouted in a deep voice, "Company Commander, come up to the stage to receive the battle plan." He then took out 3 Jade archives. The 3 men, standing in front of the 3 teams, rushed up to the stone platform. They each received a Jade archive from Guan Yu and immediately scanned it with their divine sense. Once they were done, they returned the Jade archives and dashed to the front of their respective teams. The 3 of them shouted to the members of their respective teams, "Dress according to the requirements of Battle Plan Number 3. Carry the appropriate weapons. You are required to assemble within 5 minutes. Dismissed." Whoosh! In an instant, all 3 teams rushed back to their rooms. Not long after, one by one, they rushed out dressed in black, with black scarves wrapped around their heads. After they were in position, the company commanders gathered their platoon commanders and squad leaders and quickly passed down the battle plan. Finally, one by one, the company commanders reported to Guan Yu. Reporting. First company is ready. Reporting. Second company is ready. Reporting. Third company is ready. Guan Yu nodded and shouted, "Order!" Once the target has entered the encirclement, the first round of attack will be concentrated by all 3 companies. We must inflict the greatest amount of damage to the target. Once we achieve the desired effect, immediately move on to the second round of attack. First company and third company will be the main attackers, while second company will support them. Also, seize the spoils of war as fast as possible. Considering that the target may have a large number of reinforcements, once this situation is discovered, third company will immediately switch from the main attack to a defensive position. If the defensive position is not ideal, first company and second company will quickly return to support. Gather the greatest fighting strength possible and retreat quickly. If the situation becomes extremely dire, first company and second company will retreat, while third company will cover the rear. Understood? Understood. The shouts shook the heavens. With a wave of Guan Yu's hand, the company commanders turned around and shouted, "Move out!" With the order, over 300 people pulled the black scarves from their necks to their noses, revealing only their eyes. They quickly flew into the sky, with Guan Yu following closely behind. In an instant, the entire field became quiet, with only the flickering of fire. Standing on the roof, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. Not bad. From the time of the emergency assembly to the time of departure, it took less than 10 minutes. Sigh. But their weapons are different, and their cultivation methods are also different. I wonder if they can unleash the greatest power in a group battle. Looks like I'll have to find an opportunity to drag them out and test it out. Currently, Yu Qianqiu was the only one living in the small courtyard, and it was very quiet. Yang Qian was also very perceptive. When he saw that the direct disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion's managing elder and the daughter of the 10,000 Fragrance Gardens managing elder were together, he no longer assigned anyone to this courtyard. After the death of the Alchemy Pavilion's external deacon, Yin Shu, Guan Weiwu had not found anyone to replace him. For the time being, the internal deacon, Yang Qian, was in charge of all these miscellaneous matters. He had practically become the Alchemy Pavilion's chief steward and had a lot of power. Yu Qianqiu leisurely walked towards the main hall of the Alchemy Pavilion. Many disciples would call him Martial Uncle when they saw him, and those of the same generation would greet each other. Those of a higher generation would also nod at him. As for the fact that his cultivation had already reached the core formation stage, he did not tell anyone on Fushin Island. All in all, these days were quite comfortable. Thinking back to what Gu Qingyun had said when he saw his carefree life, he said, "You're the best." For someone of my cultivation, in a place like the Cultivation Pavilion, where experts are as common as clouds, it would be tiring to just greet and greet. It would be best for me to obediently hide and cultivate and not come out. Do you know where Deacon Yang is? Yu Qianqiu pulled a disciple over and asked. He had come to find Yang Qian. After the disciple greeted him, he told him that Yang Qian was in the main hall. When he walked into the main hall, he saw Yang Qian looking around. Deacon Yang, Yu Qianqiu shouted. Yang Qian turned around and saw that it was him. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It's really difficult to see you even once. Tell me, why did you take the initiative to find me this time? Look at what you're saying. Aren't you too busy right now? I don't want to disturb you so often." Yu Qianqiu joked. The two of them had always had a good relationship and would often joke around like this when they met. "I still have things to do. If you have something to say, just say it," Yang Qian said bluntly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and asked, "I heard that all the sects are going to send more people to the Cultivation Alliance. Is this true? You still don't know if it's true or not. Didn't the person in Wanfen Garden tell you?" Yang Qian smiled meaningfully. "I only heard about this. I don't know the specifics. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to disturb you." "Oh." Yang Qian smiled noncommittally. He paused and said, "It's true. The cause is the matter between Ong Kwangsung and the Demon Blood Palace. Both sides have stopped fighting, but this time, many sects were involved. Regarding Ong Kwangsung always stirring up trouble, all the righteous sects in the cultivation world are very angry. Therefore, they decided to strengthen the Cultivation Alliance in name only. It will truly play a role of fair adjudication. Those sects that cause trouble will be punished together. Right now, all the sects are discussing the specifics. I reckon that in a few days, they will send people to put into action." Yu Qianqiu nodded in thought. "So it was like this." He understood. Yang Qian looked at him and said strangely, "Why do you ask? Do you want to go? I advise you not to think about it. This kind of thing is usually led by the people of the Cultivation Pavilion. It has nothing to do with the people of the other sections." Chapter 148. What kind of logic is this? Yu Qianqiu frowned. Everyone is a disciple of Fushin Island. Why is the Cultivation Pavilion in charge of this matter? Isn't the sect being a little too biased by doing this? His voice grew louder as he spoke. He wasn't excited, but he really wanted this chance to leave the island. With the name of Fushin Island, Ong Kwangsung believed that everything would go smoothly. So what if the other party recognized that this Yu Qianqiu was that Yu Qianqiu? As long as he could see Chu Ping fulfill his promise, he would just deny it. He didn't believe that Ong Kwangsung would dare to detain a disciple of Fushin Island. Even if he took a step back, could they detain him? As for what kind of trouble he would cause, that was a matter for the future. He had been away from Chu Ping for too long. On the surface, he looked like he was living comfortably, but who knew that there was a thorn in his throat? He couldn't eat or sleep well. He wanted to go according to his plan, but the time was too torturous. Who knew how long he would have to wait? "Lower your voice. How dare you speak so carelessly?" Yang Qian dragged him to a remote place outside the hall. He was slightly annoyed. Who said that the sect is biased? The disciples that are sent out represent the face of supporting Immortal Island. They might encounter unexpected situations at any time. That's why the Cultivation Pavilion has to choose the most elite disciples of the same cultivation level. How can you say that the sect is biased? Don't the other branches have elite disciples? Why we have to choose from the Cultivation Pavilion? Yu Qianqiu was a little restless, so his words were a little direct. Yang Qian was indeed a little angry. A Foundation Establishment disciple actually dared to speak to him in such a tone. Then he thought of the two principal elders standing behind him and calmed himself down. Then he said earnestly, "You've been on supporting Immortal Island for a long time. You have to know your priorities. What is the master?" The Cultivation Pavilion was the foundation of the entire supporting Immortal Island. Every generation's sect master was a principal elder of the cultivation pavilion, so the cultivation pavilion was the master. The existence of the other branches is to cooperate with the cultivation pavilion. This is the first time. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou's face was still dark, he explained again, "This trip to the cultivation alliance isn't like usual. We'll have to work with other sects for a long time. To put it bluntly, the people who go out are related to the reputation of Fuxian Island, the #1 sect in the world. Those who can go are the elite disciples of various cultivation periods." The sect has already decided that in addition to appointing a pavilion of cultivation elder as the person in charge, 3 days from now, there will be a selection competition at the pavilion of cultivation to select 5 nascent soul disciples and 10 core formation disciples. Foundation establishment disciples will not be included. His last sentence was undoubtedly telling Yu Qianzhou, "You're still in the foundation establishment stage. Don't count on it." Yu Qianzhou furrowed his brows and asked, "What kind of screening method? Did the sect stipulate that only disciples of the Pavilion of Cultivation can participate?" "No, as long as you're in the nascent soul or core formation stage, you can participate. The nascent soul disciples will be in the top 5, and the core formation disciples will be in the top 10. However, according to convention, the other branches won't participate. In fact, they don't have to participate. You can imagine the result. On one side are disciples who have no time to cultivate, and on the other side are disciples who put all their energy into cultivation. Among the disciples of the same level, how many can be a match for the Pavilion of Cultivation?" Yu Qianzhou happily said, "Deacon Yang, if I want to participate, where do I go to sign up?" Seeing that this guy still didn't give up, Yang Xian said with a slightly unhappy expression, "What? Did you just ignore what I just said? Didn't you hear me say that Foundation Establishment disciples can't participate?" "Who said I'm a Foundation Establishment disciple?" said Yu Qianzhou with a smile. He stretched out a palm, and a plume of smoke rose up from his palm. In an instant, 3 Bingdi lotuses were condensed, swaying in the wind in a lifelike manner. 2 of the lotuses were in full bloom. The other one was still a bud and hadn't bloomed yet, but it clearly told the other party that his cultivation had reached the early stage of core formation. Early stage of core formation? Yang Qian was dumbstruck. If he remembered correctly, when Yu Qianzhou first came to Fuxian Island, he was only at the 10th level of qi refining. It had only been 6 or 7 years, but he had already reached the early stage of core formation. How was this possible? But the truth was right in front of him. Without this cultivation, it was impossible to release one's vitality and form 3 vivid twin lotuses. Yang Xian's throat trembled. He himself had spent more than 50 years to reach the early stage of core formation, which was not bad. After a long time, he said, "Core formation disciples can go to Penglai Pavilion's utility hall to register for the competition." Suddenly, he remembered something and changed the topic. "Wait for me here. Don't leave yet." With that, he ran away. Yu Qianzhou was startled and didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a while, he saw Yang Qian and Guan Weiwu rushing over. He groaned in his heart. "Damn it. Looks like I have to bleed a little this time. Otherwise, I won't be able to fool them." Guan Weiwu walked up to him and asked with a serious expression, "Are you really at the early stage of core formation? What is going on? You should know that this is not a small matter." Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. I have something to say to you in private. I also want to go to your pill room to show you something." "You want to go to my pill room?" Guan Weiwu's eyes flashed as he looked at his favorite disciple and said, "Follow me." Yu Qianzhou obediently followed his master to the elder's pill room under the alchemy pavilion. Yang Qian knew that the master and disciple had something private to talk about, so he didn't follow. Guan Weiwu turned around and said, "There's only the 2 of us here. If you have something to say, say it." Yu Qianzhou embarrassedly said, "I deserve to die. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. In fact, I have long since developed a better method to make the vitality pill. However, I was blinded by greed and secretly made a lot of it for myself. That's why I was able to forcefully raise my cultivation to the core formation stage in a few years." His voice became softer and softer, as if he had made a huge mistake. What? Guan Weiwu cried out in surprise. Is what you said true? Then, his face was full of surprise. He eagerly rubbed his palms and regretfully said, Why didn't you say so earlier? AI, why didn't you say so earlier? Damn it. If it wasn't for this competition and the fact that the 10,000 Fragrance Garden has a limited supply of spirit herbs, I wouldn't have said it even if I was beaten to death. Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart and explained, Actually, I wanted to tell Master long ago, but I made a mistake first, so I didn't dare to say it. This time, I heard that there is a competition at the Cultivation Pavilion, but no one from my Alchemy Pavilion is participating. This disciple can't take this lying down and wants to compete with the disciples of the Cultivation Pavilion. That's why I said this. I hope Master can see this disciple's sincerity and help this disciple out of this predicament. This disciple promises not to do this again. Let's not talk about this for now. There are spirit herbs for refining the vitality pill. First, refine a furnace for me to see. Guan Weiwu pointed to a pile of spirit herbs to the side with an anxious expression. Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, The Pavilion of Cultivation's competition requires those who are at least core formation to participate. Because of this, I reveal my cultivation level. I thought about how I would refine pills for myself. I don't know what the consequences would be if word got out. Right now, my heart is in a mess. How could I still have the mood to refine pills? Guan Weiwu was surprised and immediately shouted, Who dares to say that you did it for yourself? If anyone dares to say that, tell them to come find me. Everything was clearly arranged by me, so what are you worried about? He then laughed mischievously and said, Good disciple, come, refine a furnace for Master to see. Master will take care of everything else for you, so you don't need to worry. Chapter 149. AI. This kind of thing, he could only fool him. In fact, he didn't know how many origin chi pills he would need to take to break through from foundation establishment to core formation. To be able to be so fast was all because of the top-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu bowed to the ground again. Thank you, Master, for your help. No need to be so polite. Quickly let Master see how you refine the origin chi pills. Guan Weiwu couldn't wait any longer. Yu Qianqiu immediately picked up a few spiritual herbs, threw them into the furnace, and concentrated on refining. Guan Weiwu's divine sense followed, and once again witnessed his disciple's miraculous refining technique. He shook his head and sighed. He couldn't figure out what was going on. With his own alchemy attainments, he couldn't learn such a technique. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't figure out why his master was so stupid. Even that brat Xinfeng had learned his refining technique quite well, but he still couldn't get the hang of it. Perhaps it was because he didn't teach him diligently. But he was his master, and the disciple teaching his master was too embarrassing for anyone to ask. Yu Qianqiu actually didn't know that his refining technique was actually faster for newcomers who had never come into contact with alchemy. The more experienced they were, the more they would have their own deep-rooted beliefs. It wasn't something that could be changed easily. 20 origin chi pills were fresh out of the furnace. Guan Weiwu looked at the hazy pill halo in his hand and sighed again and again. So it's like this, disciple. You're really a genius. Master pondered for a lifetime and couldn't figure it out, but AI. Master will help you ask the sect for credit. Don't, Master, please don't do this again. Actually, without Master's strong support, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend the refining method with peace of mind. This credit should be Master's. Yu Qianqiu said sincerely. In his heart, he thought, I'll only be at ease if you accept the benefits. Unexpectedly, Guan Weiwu shook his head and smiled bitterly. What kind of person do you think Master is? In the end, Yu Qianqiu rejected it a few times, but it still didn't work. When it came to respecting intellectual property rights, the old man was fair and just leaving people speechless. It was easy to imagine what happened next. Sect Master Feng Xiangtian arrived with a group of elders. After confirming the truth, Yu Qianqiu almost couldn't raise his head due to the praise. Feng Xiangtian was so happy that he immediately ordered people to give Yu Qianshou 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones. This really shocked the surrounding people. All the elders looked at this millionaire with a strange expression. This was not a small amount of money, but it was indeed worth it compared to his contribution. The sect leader happily led the group of people away. Guan Weiwu pulled Yu Qianshou to the side and quietly explained some things to him. The latter was pleasantly surprised and nodded repeatedly to thank his master, while the former began to arrange the refining plan of the essence Qi pill in the alchemy pavilion. Yu Qianshou never got involved in this kind of thing. He left the alchemy pavilion and went directly to Penglai Pavilion. When he arrived at the miscellaneous hall's chore office and asked to participate in the pavilion of cultivations competition, the disciples in the chore office looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect a disciple of the alchemy pavilion to participate in this competition. According to the rules, they had to accept it, but when they checked Yu Qianshou's cultivation, they found that it was still early-stage foundation establishment. Thus, they told him that he had to go to the Pavilion of Cultivation to prove his cultivation as early-stage core formation before he was qualified to participate in this competition. Yu Qianshou immediately went to the Pavilion of Cultivation and found that he couldn't prove his cultivation beyond his cultivation level. As a result, he went from mid-stage foundation establishment to late-stage foundation establishment to early-stage core formation in one go, causing the elders who helped him to be a bit confused. He didn't care about this and went to the Penglai Pavilion's chore office again. He finally successfully signed up to participate in the Pavilion of Cultivations competition. Just as he was about to leave the chore office, he ran into someone he really didn't want to see, someone who looked at him with hostility every time they met. Yu Qianshou bowed and said, "Elder Yin." With that, he was about to leave. "Yu Qianshou, take care," the chore office's head Elder Yin Ta said coldly. Yu Qianshou stopped, turned around, and said respectfully, "Elder Yin, what's the matter?" Yin Ta said in a deep voice, "Why do you hide when you see me? Did you do something shameful?" Elder Yin must be joking. Disciple wouldn't dare. "I have something to ask you. Do you dare to answer me honestly?" Disciple will definitely tell you everything I know. Actually, Yu Qianshou wasn't afraid of him, but he really didn't want to provoke him. After staying on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, Yu Qianshou more or less knew some things. Although supporting Immortal Island was known as the #1 sect in the cultivation world, it wasn't a monolithic entity. It was actually controlled by a few internal forces. These forces had always been competing in the dark, and they all wanted to take control of supporting Immortal Island. Starting from Ma Jiugu's generation, the Guan family produced many talented people, and that generation started to take control of supporting Immortal Island. When it came to Guan Dinghai's generation, because of his daughter's matter, Guan Dinghai was pushed down from the position of sect master by the opposition. However, the Guan family didn't want to hand over the power to the opposition. Normally, the position would be passed to the next generation, Guan Weiwu. However, Guan Weiwu was too disappointing and couldn't take up such a big responsibility. In the end, the Guan family pushed Guan Dinghai's eldest personal disciple, Feng Xiangtian, to the position of sect master. It should be said that the power of supporting Immortal Island still belonged to the Guan family. As for Yu Qianshou, as Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, he was also a member of the Guan family. In the past, Yu Qianshou didn't know about it, so he always went against Yin Shu. Now that he knew and understood that Yin Shu happened to be a member of the opposition, he couldn't help but feel that it was a close call. If he wasn't careful, he would be involved in the competition between the major forces. That wasn't a joke. Any one of them could be stronger than a sect like Ong Kwangsung. He really couldn't afford to offend them. Yin Tuo stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, "I heard something recently. I heard that during the Demon Ghost Regent's trial, when the Ghost General killed the disciples of various sects in a big tent, you were also in that big tent. Is that true?" "Yes. I also heard that you have a good relationship with the Ghost General and saved many people. Why didn't you save the people in the big tent as well?" When Yin Tuo said this, his tone revealed a bit of fierceness. Obviously, He was still brooding over his son's death. Damn it! Your son wanted to kill me that time, but he was already killed by me in advance. You still want me to save him? Old bastard, is there something wrong with your head? Yu Qianshou sighed and said, Elder Yin, you may not know this, but at that time, the Ghost General ordered us to meet him within an hour. A group of disciples with weaker cultivation really had nowhere to hide, so we could only do as he said. As a result, some disciples disobeyed the Ghost General's order, which made the Ghost General furious. At that time, I begged him bitterly, but the Ghost General never showed mercy to those who dared to disobey him. So, sigh. Yin Tuo's face twitched for a while before he asked again, with the Ghost General's strength, killing them is naturally a piece of cake. Why did he have to capture them in the tent before killing them? Old bastard, I asked the Ghost General to do this in order to kill your son. How dare you be so fierce to me? You see how I'll deal with you. Yu Qianshou paused and said, Elder Yin, I won't hide it from you. Actually, I've been suspecting something. Don't talk in riddles with me. Yin Tuo snorted coldly. Yu Qianshou nodded and said with a troubled expression, I accidentally heard something at that time, and I don't know if I heard it wrong. I didn't dare to say it, because it's not a small matter after all. Actually, I suspect that those people are not dead. Yin Tuo's body trembled, and he grabbed Yu Qianshou's shoulder and said while gasping for breath, What did you say? What did you hear at that time? Why do you suspect that those people are not dead? Chapter 150. Sigh. Old fart. It's easy if you're anxious, but I'm afraid you're not. Yu Qianshou looked at the hand on his shoulder and told him seriously, Elder Yin, you're hurting me. Ah. Yin Tuo reacted and immediately let go of his hand. He squeezed out an ugly smile and said, Tell me your suspicions. Yes. Since Elder Yin has asked, I will naturally tell you the truth. Yu Qianshou lowered his head and pondered for a while. He then raised his head and said, Elder Yin, you might not know, but Ghost General has a concubine named Ji. My suspicions are related to her. At that time, when I begged the Ghost General to let those disciples go, I ended up angering the Ghost General, and he chased me out. Before I came out, I seem to have heard that you Ji begging the Ghost General not to kill those people. Yin Tuo's eyes widened. Didn't you say that you saw Ghost General kill those disciples with your own eyes? Who said that? I've never said that I saw the Ghost General kill them with my own eyes. I don't dare to say things that I don't have proof. You must know that when Ghost General broke camp, I didn't even see the bodies of those disciples. All the disciples who were there saw it. Yu Qianshou looked very innocent. Yin Tuo swallowed hard and said with an agitated expression, Then do you remember what Yu Ji said at that time? Elder Yin, don't rush me. It's been so long. Let me think about it. Yu Qianshou frowned. Yin Tuo quickly nodded and said, Think about it. Think about it slowly. I won't rush you once you've thought it through. Yu Qianshou made a few gestures as if he was thinking about it carefully. Yin Tuo waited at the side with a bitter smile, which almost made the former want to laugh. After a long time, he slowly nodded and said, General, I think Yu Ji's original words were like this. General, I've seen those servants who serve me in Chili Wind Valley for thousands of years, and I'm really tired of them. Why don't you let them go and send them to Chili Wind Valley to be servants? What do you think? Yu Qianshou imitated Yu Ji's speech vividly and came back to his senses. He said seriously, If I remember correctly, that should be what she said. Then do you remember if Ghost General promised her or not? Yin Tuo asked excitedly. Yu Qianshou frowned and said thoughtfully, Because I had already walked out of the tent at that time, I seemed to vaguely hear Ghost General say very good or something. But after thinking about it, I think I must have heard it wrong. Otherwise, after Ghost General let them go, how could we not even see their shadows? Alas, Elder Yin, just pretend that I didn't say what I said today. I'm just guessing about what happened that day. Let's take everyone's conclusion as the truth. I still have something to do and will leave first. Yin Tuo stood there in a daze. After a long time, he came back to his senses and found that Yu Qianshou had already disappeared. He opened his mouth and froze in place. 2 days later, on the square in front of the main hall of Penglai Pavilion, a big wooden sign announced the list of the competition, which attracted many people to watch. There were nearly 300 disciples participating in the nascent soul stage competition and nearly 1,000 disciples participating in the core formation stage competition. Almost all of them were disciples of the cultivation pavilion. However, there was one exception. At the bottom was written, Alchemy Pavilion, Early Stage Core Formation, Yu Qianshou, set off by the more than 1,000 pavilion of cultivation disciples. It was exceptionally prominent. Perhaps someone was deliberately making fun of it, but the words at the very bottom were twice as large as the ones at the top. It was impossible for it not to stand out. This news immediately caused an uproar on Fushin Island. First, no one expected the famous Yu Qianshou to reach the core formation stage so quickly. Second, no one expected something that had not been seen for thousands of years to happen. There were actually disciples from other sects who wanted to compete with the cultivation pavilion. It was really exciting. In comparison, no one paid attention to how his cultivation level increased so quickly. Everyone was guessing how many rounds Yu Qianshou could last. Due to the celebrity effect, the Alchemy Pavilion suddenly became the focal point of Fushin Island. As long as someone met a disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion, they would stop them and ask them about Yu Qianshou. The questions they asked were very strange. In short, most people felt that Yu Qianshou was looking for a thrill. Yu Qianshou's courtyard was also constantly visited by guests. The first to visit was Furong. After the two of them parted ways, Gu Qingyun came again. The moment he saw Yu Qianshou, he asked in amazement, "Tisk TSK? Your actions are no different from challenging the cultivation pavilion. There are many core formation disciples in our cultivation pavilion who want to meet you in the first battle. They want to defeat you and make a name for themselves. By the way, when did you reach the core formation stage? How come I didn't know? It seems it is good to have a principal elder of the Alchemy Pavilion as a master. Elder Guan must have given you a lot of elixirs, right? Otherwise, how could your cultivation level increase so quickly? Do you have anything good for me?" Yu Qianshou directly coaxed this meddlesome woman who asked a lot of questions to leave. Not long after, Cheng Gengqing heard the news and came again. After praising his courage, he shook his head and left with a sigh. Following that, Yang Qian also came. He said helplessly, "You really dared to do it." He walked around him a few times and also left. Soon after, Ko Xiuhua and the other two women, as well as Xiao Wanqing from the safe pavilion, also came together. The four women were very confident in him. Xiao Wanqing even encouraged him and declared, "Tomorrow, the four of us will watch your battle together." Yu Qianshou thanked the four women and saw them off. Just as he was about to take a breath, his master came again. Guan Weiwu stared at him from head to toe countless times and finally sighed, "Disciple, if possible, try to hold on for a few more matches. You have to know that if you lose the first match, it will not look good for our Alchemy Pavilion. I didn't think you would really be so impulsive." After he finished speaking, he scratched his dirty hair and left in confusion. He originally thought that those who should come were all here and that it should be about time. Who knew that there would be more people coming, and each of them was higher than the last. First, there was a person who surprised him. Yin Tuo actually came personally and encouraged him before leaving. Then, the head elder of Wanfen Garden, Fernan, also came. Elder Fernan was like a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. He nodded with gratification and said, "Since you have signed up, don't think too much. When the time comes, go all out. So what if it is the cultivation pavilion? We are all at core formation stage. Why should we be afraid of them?" Yu Qianshou repeatedly said yes and sent him out. The person who came next shocked Yu Qianshou. It was actually his master's father, the current Guan Dinghai, the previous head of Fushin Island. Guan Dinghai stared at him deeply and asked, "Did you decide this yourself, or your master? Or did someone else make you do this?" After Yu Qianshou repeatedly stressed that it was his decision, Guan Dinghai nodded non-committally and left. It was hard to tell if he was happy or unhappy. Yu Qianshou heaved a sigh of relief. He thought about everyone and thought, Ma Jugu will be next. Unfortunately, he guessed correctly. Ma Jugu really came with Lan Bingxue. Ma Jugu revealed a rare smile and said, I was right about you. A man shouldn't be so timid. Sigh, it's so good to be young. Before leaving, she added, there is something you don't know. Not long after you left the mulberry garden, that girl, Yin Zixiao, went back. As for where she went, I think you should know, right? With that said, she trembled and walked away. Lan Bingxue looked at him with a complicated gaze. Not far from the courtyard, there were two nascent soul disciples chatting. When they saw the people coming and going, they couldn't help but notice them. When they saw that the people coming were all of higher ranks than the other, they were speechless. They looked at each other and quickly left. They were afraid that they would see something the higher-ups didn't want them to see. Yu Qianshou stood at the entrance of the courtyard and took a deep breath. He really didn't think that participating in a competition would cause such a big commotion. After confirming that no one else would come, he decided to take a good rest. No matter what, he had a rest for tomorrow's competition. In fact, he was worried that the sect head would also come. Chapter 151. The competition was held in the large square in front of the main hall of the cultivation pavilion. There were people everywhere on the ground, on the trees, on the roofs. Sect head Feng Xiangtian and the other elders stood on the top floor of the cultivation pavilion. They looked around and were secretly shocked. Why did so many disciples come to watch? There had been no lack of similar competitions in the past, but it was definitely not as influential as this one. It actually completely surrounded the surroundings. What they didn't know was that other than the disciples from the cultivation pavilion, almost all the disciples from the other factions who had nothing to do had come. Those who had something to do had already finished what they were doing. All of them wanted to see Yu Qianshou from the alchemy pavilion. It wasn't because Yu Qianshou had a lot of influence on them, but because Yu Qianshou's actions were what the other factions wanted to do but didn't dare to do. It was their dream. They were hoping that Yu Qianshou would be able to break the undefeated legend of the cultivation pavilion on supporting Immortal Island and help them, who were inferior to him, vent their anger. That was all. Many disciples from the other factions who hadn't reached Foundation establishment side. They were depressed that they couldn't come out and watch the competition. Around the square, the disciples from the other factions stood together with the people from the cultivation pavilion. The alchemy pavilion had already become the focus of the audience. Even before it appeared, its limelight had already overshadowed the pavilion of cultivation. Who knew how many people were pointing and whispering? The pavilion of cultivation, on the other hand, had become a foil. This made the disciples of the pavilion of cultivation very unhappy. This time, the alchemy pavilion came out in full force. Other than a few disciples who hadn't reached Foundation establishment, everyone else came to support Yu Qianshou. Even Guan Weiwu stood on the platform of the cultivation pavilion. A few elders walked out of the cultivation pavilion's main hall, led by Dongfang Changgao. Behind them, a few disciples carried out a few large boxes and lined them up in front of the cultivation pavilion's main hall. The elders each walked in front of a large box. Dongfang Chang Ao's voice echoed throughout the square. There are a total of 987 disciples participating in the core formation competition. For fairness, we have decided to draw lots. There are two sets of wooden lots numbered from 1 to 493 in these 4 boxes. Those who draw the same number will compete against each other. Because there is only one person, there is a white lot in each box. The disciple who draws the white lot will advance to the second round of the competition. Now, all participating disciples, come and draw lots. Yang Qian turned around to look at Yu Qian, who was beside him, and said with a bitter smile, the 987th place will be decided by drawing lots. You'll have to win at least 7 matches in a row to get into the top 10. You'd better be prepared. Yu Qianshou smiled indifferently and walked towards the lottery box in the main hall. The moment he walked out, he attracted the attention of tens of thousands of disciples. Almost everyone's head turned towards the direction of the alchemy pavilion. Feng Xiangtian and the others, who were standing on top of the cultivation pavilion, could clearly see the changes in their surroundings. The white faces on both sides of their heads turned to the back of their heads. It was a spectacular sight. Many elders laughed. Elder Mo of the Alchemy Pavilion said eccentrically, "Old Guan, this disciple of yours is interesting." Guan Weiwu turned his head and stared at him. "What? You're not convinced? If you have the ability, your Alchemy Pavilion can also pull out a disciple like this." Elder Mo chuckled. "I know myself. Since I know it will be embarrassing to pull him out, it's better if I don't pull him out. The two of you are bickering. Can't you see that there are tens of thousands of disciples below?" Sect Master Feng Xiangtian snorted coldly without turning his head back. The two principal elders immediately stared at each other without saying a word. Actually, Yu Qinshu still wanted to keep a low profile. However, all the other disciples had come out from the Cultivation Pavilion. He was the only one who walked out from the Alchemy Pavilion. It was impossible for him not to attract attention. Yu Qinshu looked around. There were bright eyes staring at him everywhere. It was as if he had become a rare animal in the zoo. "Damn it! Look! I won't collect money." Yu Qinshu muttered to himself as he slowly walked over. There were nearly 1,000 people waiting to draw lots anyway. There was no hurry. Needless to say, his calm and unhurried demeanor made many people admire him. There were many people, so the people who had drawn lots consciously stood on both sides. Seeing that the lots were almost drawn, Yu Qinshu found a box with fewer people and stood in line. He slowly approached the box. When it was his turn, he realized that the elder who was holding the box with one hand had used his divine sense to protect the box. Obviously, he was afraid that someone would insert their divine sense into the box to cheat. Yu Qinshu didn't think about cheating. To him, it was the same no matter who he fought. He reached into the box and found that it was almost empty. His fingers touched one and he grabbed it. After taking it out, he didn't look at it and stood to the side obediently. However, he found that the surrounding disciples were looking at him as if they were demons looking at Tang Seng's flesh. Not long after, the lots were drawn. Dongfang Chang Ao glanced at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Those who have drawn the white lot, hand over your white lot and wait for the next round of drawing lots." Everyone looked at the lot in their hands and then looked at each other. Yu Qinshu didn't know the people around him, so he stood there obediently. He didn't believe that his luck was so good that he could draw the white lot from nearly 1,000 people. After a while, no one stood out among the disciples. Everyone looked at each other and didn't understand what was going on. Feng Xiangtian's face instantly darkened. He stared at Dongfang Chang Ao and shouted, "Chang Ao, what's going on?" Dongfang Chang Ao bowed to the people upstairs, then turned around and said sternly, "Look at the lots in your hands again. Look carefully." Yu Qinshu suddenly felt a little bad. Was his luck really so good? How did he get a free lot just like that? He opened the lot in his hand and looked at it from the front to the back. Suddenly, a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. Both sides of this thin piece of wood were smooth. It was difficult to find even the slightest flaw, let alone find the words. It was a good thing to draw the white lot, but it was a little hot in his hand. Wasn't it asking for his life? The joke was a little too much. Did everyone look at the lot in your hand clearly? The disciples who drew the white lot stand out. Dongfang Chang Ao was very depressed. Such a small thing actually caused the sect leader to scold him in front of everyone. "Elder Dongfang, is the lot without words called the white lot?" Someone in the crowd raised a hand and asked weakly. Dongfang Chang Ao said snappily yes. Yu Qinshu quickly flashed out of the crowd and ran to Dongfang Chang Ao with a white lot in his hand. He handed it over with both hands and said in fear and trepidation, "This disciple really didn't know that the lot without words was a white lot. Elder, please punish me." Everyone almost fainted. The surroundings suddenly became lively, and there was endless laughter. Dongfang Chang Ao's face was so gloomy that water could be wrung out. Feng Xiangtian, who was upstairs, saw that the disciple was actually Yu Qinshu. His mouth opened, but he didn't say anything. Guan Weiwu and Ferdinand were dumbfounded. Elder Mo of the Equipment Refining Pavilion lowered his head and hit his head on the railing. He laughed so hard that he couldn't stand straight. After a while, he gasped and said, "Old Guan, this disciple of yours is too good at torturing people. When has Dongfang Chong AO been played like this before? Being in the limelight like this will kill people, huh? Chapter 152. Dongfang Chong AO naturally knew who Yu Qianqiu was. He turned around and looked at the sect leader. Feng Xiangtian shouted, Yu Qianqiu, do you know where you are? Is this a place where you can mess around? Since you didn't know anything, I'll forgive you for now. If you do it again, I won't let you off lightly. Yu Qianqiu bowed in gratitude. Chong AO, let's continue. Dongfang Chong AO nodded and turned around to look at Yu Qianqiu. He looked around and shouted, Alchemy Pavilion's Yu Qianqiu has drawn the white lot and will advance to the next round of the competition unconditionally. Those who have drawn lots 1 to 10, stay here. The rest of the disciples can leave for now. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. As if he had been granted amnesty, he jogged back to the Alchemy Pavilion. Seeing him like this, many people laughed to death. Among the Cultivation Pavilion's crowd, Gu Qingyun shook his head helplessly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Wanqing, who was mixed in the crowd of Wanfen Garden, fell powerlessly on Ko Shuahua's shoulder. She couldn't stop giggling. The other girls also couldn't help but smile. Unfortunately, Furong didn't like crowded places and didn't come this time. Otherwise, who knew what she would think if she saw this? Yusai, I really don't know what to say to you. Yang Qian smiled bitterly as he looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had run back to his side. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands at the Alchemy Pavilion disciples and said, I really didn't do it on purpose. I made a fool of myself in front of everyone. I'm really sorry. Everyone revealed a smile of support. After the spectators laughed, they were greatly disappointed. They had come here mainly for Yu Qianqiu. Who would have thought that he would run into him when there was a 1 in 1,000 chance? Who could they go to talk to about this? The plaza was large enough, and it was divided into 10 areas, each supervised by 10 elders. This time, the competition between the 10 pairs of disciples began. The joke just now was also temporarily thrown aside by the crowd, and their attention shifted to the competition. The sword transformed into a stream of light, crisscrossing in all directions. Silhouettes flashed and shouted. For a moment, the entire square was filled with the sound of metal clashing, and there were even sounds of collisions. After the competition, most of the 10 disciples who lost were injured. Some were even carried away with serious injuries. Those who were on good terms with Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but worry for him. Death and injury were allowed in this competition. Naturally, the goal was to allow the participants to display their full strength. Looking at the competition just now, many people had shown mercy. Perhaps it was because they were disciples of the same faction, so it was not good for them to kill. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain themselves when they returned. But for Yu Qianqiu, it would not be so good. Most of the disciples who signed up for the competition were late core formation stage disciples. At the same time, they were also the elites of the Cultivation Pavilion. Think about it. If there was a large difference in cultivation, they would have already suffered a great loss. Although they were all core formation cultivators, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was 2 whole layers lower than theirs. If his opponent didn't show mercy, then Yu Qianqiu's situation would be obvious. Yu Qianqiu had also discovered that the closer the cultivation of the 2 disciples, the more dangerous the battle would be. Everyone wanted to win and would often attack with the intention of killing the other. As a result, once the victor was decided, one side would either die or be seriously injured. It was not like when there was a large difference in cultivation. Those with higher cultivation could easily win, so they could control their strength. If the competition continued like this, then a few people would definitely die. Sure enough, in the second round, a disciple's head was cut off by his opponent. The smell of blood spread and seemed to have stimulated the competing disciples. The fighting became more and more intense, and both sides often attacked each other to kill. Yang Qian looked worriedly at Yu Qianqiu. He saw that Yu Qianqiu's eyes were slightly narrowed. Feng Xiangtian, who was in the cultivation pavilion, frowned. Guan Weiwu called him over and said, Weiwu, Although Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was forcibly raised to the core formation stage by Yu, there is still a gap between him and the other disciples. His talent in alchemy is really rare. If something happens to him, it will be a great loss to supporting Immortal Island. What I mean is, should you let him think about it? If it really doesn't work, let him go up and admit defeat. Didn't he draw a blank this round? It's not too late to let him withdraw from the competition now. The elders on the side thought about it and felt that Sect leader was right. Yu Qianzhou's alchemy was a secret to others, but most of the people upstairs had seen Yu Qianzhou's alchemy with their own eyes. His talent was really great. If anything happened to him, it would be a great loss for supporting Immortal Island. They couldn't help but nod in agreement with Sect leader's opinion. Guan Weiwu was taken aback. Senior brother, wouldn't my alchemy pavilion lose face? Sect leader, I don't think it's necessary. Ferdinand walked over and said with a frown, what's the use of refining elixirs no matter how good he is? If he runs away from a competition with his fellow disciples, I'm afraid he won't be able to raise his head in supporting Immortal Island for the rest of his life, unless he leaves supporting Immortal Island in the future. In Ferdinand's mind, he didn't want his daughter to follow a waste. Yes, yes, Guan Weiwu echoed. Feng Xiangtian nodded slightly and turned his attention back to the competition. The elders didn't say anything. Nearly 1,000 people fought nearly 50 matches. A day passed just like that. In the end, most of the people who lost were injured. More than 10 disciples even lost their lives. Yu Qianzhou sat cross-legged on the ground and watched the competition from beginning to end without saying a word. Every time he saw those who killed their opponents, his eyes would unconsciously narrow and remember that person's face. There was no competition that night because it was held during the day. After the competition ended, the disciples of each faction quickly rushed back. If there was anything, they had to quickly finish it tonight. Yu Qianzhou couldn't run away from tomorrow's competition, because there were 493 disciples who won today and Yu Qianzhou who had advanced in advance. It was just an even number and could be divided into 247 matches. So, it meant that there wouldn't be a situation where there would be a blank lot tomorrow. Tomorrow was really a good day that everyone was looking forward to. The next day, the crowd didn't decrease at all. Their gazes were still focused on Yu Qianzhou, who was drawing the lot. Yu Qianzhou touched the lot and held it firmly in his palm after taking a glance. A smile appeared on his lips. His luck wasn't bad. It was a round number. The number was 20. However, he didn't know who his opponent was. When he returned to the Elixir Refinery Pavilion, Yang Qian asked, even though he already knew the answer, "Are you done?" Yu Qianzhou nodded. Seeing the worry in his eyes, he couldn't help but smile. Was there really so much to worry about? When he had been cultivating in Utopia, he had often gotten the 3 company commanders in the late-stage nascent soul realm to spar with him. That was not child's play. He was playing with real skills. Why would he be afraid of these disciples in the late-stage core formation realm? Yu Qianzhou calmly watched the competition in front of him. When he realized that his disciple, who had already killed someone yesterday, had actually killed another opponent today, Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed into slits and a cold gleam flashed in them. The surrounding people watched the matches one after another, but they still didn't see Yu Qianzhou go up. They were all a little anxious, but they didn't know what number he had drawn. When Dongfang Chong Ao announced the start of the 20th match of the day, Yu Qianzhou stood up and slowly walked towards the center of the stage. Yang Qian, who was standing to the side, let out a soft ah sound. Immediately, like a stone being tossed into 1,000 ripples, everyone's heads turned around, their gazes all focused on the figure that was slowly walking towards the center of the stage. Chapter 153. The whole place was in an uproar. People were pointing at Yu Qianzhou, who was walking out. The sect leader and others in the attic were a little surprised. Looking at the disciples, they did not expect Yu Qianzhou to have such a great influence. Gu Qingyun was a little excited. Ever since the trial in the Demon Ghost region, Yu Qianzhou seemed to have become a legend that wasn't a legend. Although the two of them were on good terms, Yu Qianzhou still suppressed Gu Qingyun to the point that he couldn't breathe. Ko Suihua and the other girls were also a little excited. So far, those who knew Yu Qianqiu in Fuxian Island had not seen him fight seriously. Their anticipation could be imagined. The 20 disciples gave the lots to Dongfang Chong Ao. The attention of these disciples was also focused on Yu Qianqiu. Their eyes were fixed on the lot in his hand. It seemed that they were all looking forward to fighting with him. The 10 elders reported the number they needed to supervise, and the disciples followed them to the competition ground. When there was only Yu Qianqiu and another person left in front of the hall, the two of them turned their heads and looked at each other. Needless to say, you and I are opponents. The person who supervised the competition was Elder Sun, who went to the Demon Ghost region last time. He glanced at the two of them and said loudly, "The one who drew number 200, follow me." After that, he walked to the last competition ground, and the two of them followed him. I say, this guy should work hard. Guan Weiwu rubbed his palms excitedly and anxiously. There were traces of water on the railing that he had just grabbed. Obviously, his palms were sweaty. Ferdinand, who was standing on the side, glanced at him and said with a smile, "Don't worry. I have paid attention to his opponent. He is not the kind of person who is cruel and merciless. Even if he can't win, it should not be a big deal." Because Yu Qianqiu often went to Wanfen Garden, many disciples of Wanfen Garden knew him. At this time, seeing him standing in the competition ground, they all talked about whether he could win or not. Xiao Wanqing and the other girls turned around and told them with certainty, Yu Qianqiu will definitely be able to do it. The girls' blind worship didn't diminish at all. Ko Suihua, on the other hand, was much more rational. After hearing their words, she shook her head slightly. "Begin." Dongfang Chong Ao's voice rang out. The onlookers immediately fell silent. The sounds of fighting immediately rang out. However, this was not what everyone was concerned about. Everyone's attention was on the two people on the 10th stage. However, the two people in the field did not make a move for a long time. The two of them sized each other up for a while and suddenly laughed, causing the surrounding people to feel a little puzzled. Yu Qianqiu's opponent cupped his fists and said with a smile, "I'm Lu Guang, a late-stage core formation cultivator. You must be the legendary Yu Qianqiu who roamed the demon and ghost domain. I've heard so much about you. I didn't think that I would be the first to fight against you. It's an honor." "So, it's Senior Marshal Brother Lu. I've seen Senior Marshal Brother fight yesterday. I hope Senior Marshal Brother will go easy on me like yesterday." Yu Qianqiu smiled and returned the greeting. He had an impression of this person. He was the only person who didn't injure his opponent in the slightest yesterday. Other than showing that he had a good heart, it could also be seen that his cultivation level was also not bad from the way he attacked. "Are the two of you here to chat or to fight?" Elder Sun, who was in charge of supervising the competition, was a little unhappy. The two of them first stood there for a while, then looked at each other, smiled, and chatted for a while. There were already a few battles in the other fields that had been decided, but the two of them still hadn't made a move. "Please." Lu Guang gestured for his opponent to make the first move. In his mind, there was a gap of 2 levels between their cultivation levels. This was a battle without any suspense. Even if he won, it would be a little unfair. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded. His entire aura suddenly changed. Although there was still a smile on his face, it was as if the person standing there wasn't a human, but an immovable mountain, indifferently looking down at the opponent in front of him. Lu Guang suddenly felt suffocated by the aura. He was shocked, and the long sword on his back shot out with a clang. He circled around his body and carefully guarded himself. Elder Sun's pupils also suddenly widened as he stared at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. The disciples who were watching the competition also noticed the strangeness here. Feng Xiangtian, who was on the pavilion, suddenly had a flash of light in his eyes. He stared at this place and slowly stroked his long beard. The group of elders also slightly squinted their eyes. At this moment, the other battles had already ended, but they still hadn't made a move. "Senior Brother Lu, be careful. The move I'm going to use is called One Sword of No Regrets. Please give me some pointers, Senior Brother Lu." Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, giving Lu Guang a great deal of pressure. He also didn't know why it was like this. His opponent's cultivation was obviously 2 levels lower than his, but he didn't know what he was afraid of. All of a sudden, everyone who was staring at the square seemed to see a flash of light. Before they could figure out what was going on, they saw a bright flying sword pointed straight at Lu Guang's throat. While everyone was silent and shocked, they heard the ing-ing sound that could only be heard when a long sword was quickly unsheathed spread throughout the square. Everyone then reacted and was shocked. What a fast speed! The sword was already on his opponent's neck, and they only heard the sound of the sword being unsheathed. Oh my God! How fast was this speed? It was too terrifying. Without a doubt, it had already surpassed the speed of sound transmission. Elder Sun was the closest person to the 2 competitors. With his cultivation, he could clearly see the sword's trajectory, but the speed of the sword was too shocking. Sect Master Feng Xiangtian's hand that was stroking his beard paused, and the group of elders were all stunned. Guan Weiwu's mouth was wide open, and his face was full of disbelief. Feeling the sharpness on his neck, Lu Guang smiled bitterly with a pale face. I've lost. The long sword that was circling around his body slowly returned to its scabbard. Was there still a need to compete? Lu Guang had already shown mercy, or else his head would have been separated from his neck. But this speed was too fast, so fast that he didn't even have a chance to react. Yu Qianshou withdrew his aura, and his long sword flashed back into its scabbard. He turned to leave. Lu Guang suddenly shouted, "Junior brother Yu, please wait." "What's the matter, senior brother Lu?" Yu Qianshou turned around and asked. "Junior brother Xiaoyu, please show mercy." Lu Guang dejectedly bowed and asked for guidance. "Just now, I heard junior brother Yu say that this move is called one sword without regrets. I felt that it was strange. I've never seen this sword technique in the Sutra Pavilion before. Junior brother Yu, please teach me so that I can understand why I lost." Yu Qianshou calmly smiled and said, "This sword technique was created when I was reading the Sutra Pavilion sword techniques. Senior brother Lu, there's no need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank yourself. If it wasn't for senior brother Lu having the heart of a Buddha at the center of the competition yesterday, my sword should have no regrets. But in the end, I still regretted it and didn't dare to hurt senior brother Lu." Finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the people from the alchemy pavilion. Lu Guang was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. It seemed that Lu Guang let him go because he didn't hurt anyone yesterday. Otherwise, that sword really would have taken his life. Thinking about it, he felt lucky for his momentary kindness yesterday. At this moment, the people from the cultivation pavilion were silent. The core formation stage disciples were all thinking about whether they could have dodged that sword if they were in Lu Guang's shoes. The other factions were boiling with excitement, as if they had won. Yu Qianshou's sword had won beautifully. With just one sword, he had defeated the cultivation pavilion's disciple. Finally, they, the inferior disciples who did odd jobs, could vent their anger. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.